Okay, I'm going to go ahead and get started this afternoon by just welcoming everyone. Welcome to Wat Tung. Nice to see all of you guys here. Welcome to everyone joining us online as well. Today, this particular course is called Introduction to the Teachings of the Buddha. In just a few hours, I'm going to introduce you to the teachings of the Buddha so that you can understand them from a high level. But then we're going to go into detail and start talking about his very first teaching, which is the Four Noble Truths. This is the teaching where you're going to understand the problem in the mind, the cause of that problem, the elimination of it, and the path forward. Because what the Buddha taught is this path to enlightenment of how to purify your mind and get to the point where the mind can be peaceful, calm, serene, and content with joy. By the time you get to enlightenment, the mind is experiencing complete peace and joy permanently. It's a mental state that is unshakable. It's steady. It's calm. The mind doesn't experience anger, sadness, frustration, irritation, annoyance, guilt, shame, fear, stress, anxiety, loneliness, boredom, shyness, resentment, and jealousy. All these discontent feelings and others are completely eliminated from the mind. I'm going to explain to you guys a little bit more about what enlightenment is as we get to that point. The way that we start our class is with a meditation. So if you guys would like to join for meditation, I'll just guide you in a meditation session. And then afterwards, I'll start the class in teaching you guys the introduction to the teachings of the Buddha. And then we'll get into the Four Noble Truths and talk about that as well. The way that I start with meditation is I start with some chanting to ease us into the meditation. This chanting, you can find them on a sheet over there on the table. You're welcome to chant along if you like. It's a laminated sheet that has the Pali chants and the English translations. If you look at the English translations, you're going to see a lot of respect and gratitude and admiration for the Buddha. And because of this, I don't think he actually created these chants himself, because a Buddha doesn't walk around teaching people to chant these things to him. That would be coming from the ego or the arrogance if somebody did that. But the students most likely created these either during his life or after his death because of this admiration and respect and gratitude that you see. So there's nothing mystical or magical about these chants. It's not prayer or worship. You won't find any rites or rituals or ceremonies or worship in the teachings of the Buddha whatsoever. It's all about training your mind. So these chants is just to ease the mind into meditation and get more benefit out of the meditation itself. Once we're in the meditation, I'll give you guys some guidance. You'll hear me speaking and guiding you. Then there'll be a period of time where it'll just be quiet and we're just all meditating together. I'm sure you hear occasional sounds here and there, but all these things are impermanent. You can just focus the mind on the breath. And then after that, we'll come out of the meditation with some more chanting. So I think most of you guys have all been with me learning meditation before. Maybe I'll just give you guys a little bit of guidance on seated position. Some of you guys haven't learned with me maybe, and maybe there's people online that are joining that haven't learned this as well. There's some kind of pointers I can give you on the seated position. There's 4 different positions that we actually learn meditation in. It's seated, lying, standing, and walking. And at different courses and retreats, I teach these in detail. But just to get you guys started, if you're on the floor, oftentimes people sit with their legs lightly crossed rather than having them real tight, because if you have your legs real tight, it'll impede the circulation and it might cause pain in the body. So if you just have your legs lightly crossed, this usually works out best. Some people like to put their legs off the mat. This might be something you decide to do because it gets your hips up in the air and it lessens the angle at the hips, the knees, and the ankles. So some people like to do it that way. There's no set way. There's not just one way to meditate in terms of the body positioning. So you find whatever is comfortable for you. The Buddha put his right hand over his left with his thumbs together, and then he put this into his lap. If this is comfortable for you, you could use it. But again, it's not about everyone doing it exactly the same way. There's other options here as well. Some people like to put their palms on their thighs or their knees, their palms up. Some people rest their hands comfortably in the lap. So find whatever is comfortable for you. The upper body should be erect. This keeps the mind attentive and alert during the meditation so that you can actively train the mind. It also helps you to breathe because with the sternum up and the shoulders back, you'll be able to breathe more easily in through the nose and out through the nose. So again, I'm going to ease us into meditation with chanting, which you guys are welcome to join along in. And then I'm going to come back in with some guidance to help you during the meditation. Arahang Samma Sambuddho Mahakava Wat Tung Mahakavanhang Apivateyami สวากขาโตมหาเกวัตตาธัมโมธัมมังนามัสสามิสุปฏิปันโนมหาเกวัตโตสาวกสังโฆสังฆังนามามินะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะอิติปิโสมหะเกวาอะระหังสัมมาสัมพุทโธวิชาจารนังสัมมุโนสกาโตโรกาวิตุอนุเตโรปุริสาดัมมาสติสัตตาตวามนุสรังโอโตภาควาติ Okay, with the lower body and hands and arms comfortable, and the upper body erect, just close the eyes and start breathing in through the nose and out through the nose. Here you're just looking to establish the breath. A nice, natural, steady, consistent breath. Not forced or controlled, just a gradual inhale through the nose, experiencing the full breath. And then whenever you're ready, exhale out through the nose. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. Your breath may not match up with the guidance that I'm providing, and that's okay. This is your practice. I'm just here for guidance. You can use this voice as a reminder that whenever you get to your next inhale, breathing gradually through the nose, developing a nice, natural, steady, consistent breath. And then whenever you're ready, exhale out through the nose, experiencing the full breath. Breathing in and out. Breathing in Once the breath is well established, start fixating the mind on the breath, either the sound of the breath coming into the nose or the sensation of air moving over the skin into the nose. The breath is the present moment. Fixate the mind on the breath, the present moment. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. With the mind focused on the breath, whenever you notice that it moves off the breath, cut that off, let it go, and come back to the breath, the present moment. No need to observe the thought, label it, judge it, analyze it, or even try to figure out where it's coming from. Whenever you notice that the mind is moved off the breath, cut that off, let it go, and come back to the breath, the present moment. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. I'm going to be quiet now and let you do this work of focusing on the breath, cutting off and letting go anytime the mind moves off the breath. You have nowhere to go. There's nothing to do. No one needs you right now. This is your time to focus on the breath. Breathing in and out. Arahang Samma Sambuddho Mahakawa Photang Mahakavanhang Abhivateyami Savakato Mahakavata Dhammo Dhammang Namasami Supatipano Mahakavato Savaka Sangho Sanghang Namami Namo Rasa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Namo Rasa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Namo Rasa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Iti pisu Mahakawa Arahang Samma Sambuddho Vicacaranang Sammuno Sakato Rokavitu Anutero Purisa Dhamma Sati Satatava Manusanang Bhoto Bhagavati. Okay, if you guys would like to slowly make your way out of meditation. Apologize, I'm a little bit sick still from my trip. Welcome to you guys. Welcome again. Nice to see all of you guys here. Welcome to everyone joining us online as well. As I mentioned, today is our introduction to the teachings of the Buddha course, where you're going to be slowly learning over the next few hours some of the introductory teachings about the teachings of the Buddha. To get us started, what I'm going to share with you guys is what is a actual Buddha. It's helpful to just understand what a Buddha is as you're getting ready to maybe look at being introduced to his teachings and starting to understand his first teachings. Let's first just understand what a Buddha actually is. What a Buddha is they're a human being who has gotten to enlightenment by themselves without the help of any teachers or any guides. They've gotten to this enlightened mental state where they've purified their mind and now they're experiencing complete peace and joy, no longer experiencing any discontent feelings. Their mind's focused, concentrated, they have clarity of mind, they have deep memory, their mind is functioning optimally, and they've acquired this mental state through their own wisdom, through their own ability, without any help from any teachers or any guides. This is the first criteria of what makes a Buddha a Buddha. The second criteria is that once an individual gets to enlightenment by themselves, they're going to then dedicate the rest of their life to sharing their independently discovered teachings with countless people. And countless people are going to get to enlightenment during that period of time. So Gotama Buddha, he got to enlightenment at the age of 35 and he died at the age of 80. So for 45 years, he shared teachings with countless people, and countless people got to enlightenment during that period of time. And you know you got to enlightenment because you know what it feels like to experience experience anger and sadness and frustration and all these other discontent feelings. So when you've gotten to the point where your mind is no longer experiencing those, then you'll know that your mind is enlightened. It'll be 1 year, 2 years, 3 years. You're not experiencing any of those feelings any longer. And that's how you'll know you're actually enlightened. So Gotama Buddha shared teachings for 45 years, and countless people got to enlightenment during his lifetime. Then the third criteria of what makes a Buddha is that they preserve their teachings in such a way that countless more people get to enlightenment after their death. So this is the three criteria of what makes a Buddha. The three primary criteria is that they get to enlightenment by themselves without the help of any teachers or any guides. They then dedicate the rest of their life to sharing their independently discovered teachings with countless people. And countless people get to enlightenment during that person's lifetime. Then they preserve their teachings in such a way that countless more people will get to enlightenment after their death. So you'll be able to get to enlightenment, but you won't be a Buddha at that point. A Buddha is a very rare, very unique individual in the world. It only, the last Buddha that the world is currently aware of existed over 2,500 years ago. So as far as the world understands, there hasn't been a Buddha since his lifetime. So this is a very rare, unique individual in the world. You'll be able to get to enlightenment, but at that point, you won't be considered a Buddha. You'll find some people that will share with you that everybody is a Buddha. And when you get to enlightenment, you will be a Buddha. But the Buddha himself didn't say this. This is what people say today, but that's not actually true. You can see very clearly in the words of the Buddha that he explains how rare it is that somebody actually comes into the world as a Buddha. We refer to this person as a fully, perfectly enlightened one because they don't have any teachers or any guides, and this is why they're fully, perfectly enlightened. If someone gets to enlightenment with teachers or guides, you might hold on to a couple of things that you're doing that didn't necessarily lead to your enlightenment, but you might just kind of continue to do those things because you were learning those at a certain period of time. Maybe you have a certain respect or gratitude for your teacher, and maybe there are certain things that you're learning that didn't actually lead to your enlightenment that you're still kind of performing or still kind of doing that didn't actually lead to your enlightenment. So there's kind of a little bit of extra baggage around. But by the time a person gets to enlightenment by themselves as a fully, perfectly enlightened one, if they're doing a meditation, for example, and a Buddha realizes that, this doesn't work, they're going to discard it. And by the time they get to enlightenment, what they know is the path to enlightenment. And they now spend the rest of their life dedicated to sharing that path. So a Buddha is like putting lights down along the sides of the path and making it very clear for people of exactly how to get to enlightenment during their lifetime. There's some other criteria of what makes a Buddha a Buddha. The next one is that a Buddha is going to have a profound memory. Even in the unenlightened state, a person who's going to become a Buddha, they will have a deep, profound memory. And this is what actually allows them to get to enlightenment by themselves without the help of any teachers or any guides. So the average individual, they have a certain limited capacity to their mind. It's kind of like a hard drive. If you think about a hard drive, it has like 500 gigabytes or 1 terabyte or something like this. And when you get to the maximum capacity, you're going to need to delete old files in order to store new files. And if you think about your life, this is why you have spotty memories about your past. If you think back to your childhood, you have just spotty memories of that. Where right now, in the last maybe 5 or 10 years, you have pretty good recall about the things you've been doing and what you've been up to. But when you think back to your childhood, you might just have spotty memories about this. And this is because you've had to delete old files in order to store new files. Where an individual who's going to become a Buddha, they don't have that limited capacity. They have an unlimited capacity to their memory. So this is how they actually get to enlightenment by themselves without the help of any teachers or any guides, because they remember countless details about their current life and their past lives as well. And then they bring forth all that wisdom, and it comes together and culminates into them being able to now get to enlightenment by themselves without the help of any teachers or any guides. So they have an unlimited capacity to their memory and to how they can recall things from their current life and their previous lives. Another thing about a person who's a Buddha is that there will be a living, breathing, walking example of their teachings. They don't teach one thing and then they practice something else. They will actually be a living, breathing, walking example of their teachings. And this is very important for a Buddha as they're teaching, because they understand that students learn just as much through their spoken words as they do through observing the teacher. So a Buddha is teaching through their actions. They're not just teaching through their words, they're teaching through their actions. When they conduct themselves in the world, their students are being able to observe that, and they're able to see what it takes to actually get to enlightenment, because they can observe the individual's certain actions, their bodily actions, their verbal actions, and their mental actions. A student can observe that and learn from that. So a Buddha is going to be a living, breathing, walking example of their teachings. They can also observe the quality of their student's mind, and then they're able to notice what challenges that student has, certain pollutions that are in that person's mind, and then offer them teachings that are going to help them to be able to overcome those challenges. Because what you're doing on the path to enlightenment is you're eliminating certain pollutions in your mind that are keeping you trapped in the unenlightened state. So a Buddha can actually observe these pollutions in their students' minds and then provide them teachings to be able to help them overcome that. But a Buddha would only do that if a student was actively learning with them. A Buddha doesn't just, show up in your life and like, hey, you got to be doing this, and you should be doing that, and you should be doing this. That would be the ego if you gave someone unsolicited guidance about what they should or shouldn't be doing in their life. A Buddha wouldn't give unsolicited guidance. They would instead only share teachings with people who are interested in learning with them. They wouldn't just butt their way into somebody's life and start sharing things with them and try to teach them. So this is one of the other qualities of an individual who's considered a Buddha. So this is what a Buddha is. And now what I'll share with you guys is some understanding of what his teachings are. This will help you to get kind of a little taste or introduction into his teachings before we actually talk about his teachings themselves. So his teachings are a path to attaining enlightenment through purification of the mind. The mental state of enlightenment is the ultimate goal of learning and practicing his teachings. When you get to this enlightened mental state, the mind is going to be peaceful, calm, serene, and content with joy permanently. The mind will never again experience anger or sadness or frustration or any of these other discontent feelings. This is a mental state that you can attain during this life, and then you can enjoy the rest of your life in that mental state, or you can also attain it at death as well. So ideally, you would attain it during life, because getting to death and attaining it there, well, that's the next best option, but you would have been frustrated and agitated and annoyed throughout your life. Whereas if you attain enlightenment, say, at the age of 20 or 30 or 40 or 50 or 60 or some other age, you would enjoy the rest of your life in that mental state, and then you could have that peace and that joy, because you'll no longer experience any of these discontent feelings. You'll hear me say these at different times: the anger, the sadness, the frustration, agitation, annoyance, guilt, shame, fear, stress, anxiety, loneliness, boredom, shyness, resentment, jealousy. Even the slightest displeasure is eliminated from the enlightened mind, and this comes through training of the mind. So these discontent feelings and others are completely eliminated because you've eliminated the causes and conditions that are producing them. You'll notice that the mind has a high degree of focus, concentration, clarity, and deep memory, because again, you've eradicated certain pollutions in the mind. When the mind is polluted, it's not going to perform optimally. This is why you might struggle sometimes to have certain memory or certain clarity or certain focus or concentration. But when you train your mind and you eradicate these pollutions, your mind will be performing optimally. So you'll have the focus, the concentration, the clarity, and the deep memory. You'll notice that you'll be able to have deep wisdom, because you'll have this deep wisdom about the path to enlightenment and the natural laws of existence, and you'll be able to be polite, kind, friendly, and respectful to all people. This is probably challenging in certain situations for you right now. There might be certain people that you can be polite, kind, friendly, and respectful to. But then there's other people that maybe you really struggle. Maybe you're impolite, unkind, unfriendly, and disrespectful. And you might even feel that you're justified in the way that you're acting or functioning. But this is actually just hindering you from being able to experience the peace and the joy. There are certain pollutions in the mind that are causing this to occur, that the mind's being impolite, unkind, unfriendly, and disrespectful. So by the time you get to enlightenment, you're not even causing harm in the world anymore. You're not causing harm to other beings. So therefore, harm isn't coming back to you. You'll notice that your personal and professional relationships are really blossoming because you're not being bitter and harsh and hostile anymore. When we're bitter, harsh, and hostile in a relationship, that's just going to come back to us. So if you treat your mom or dad or your brothers and sisters or your life partner or your children or coworkers, if you treat them in a bitter and hostile way, they're just going to treat you that way back. right? Because that's the way the unenlightened mind works. An enlightened being wouldn't do that. An enlightened being, if you treat them bitter and harsh and hostile, they're not going to treat you that way back. But other people in the world, pretty much the entire world, is unenlightened, so they're going to treat you bitter and harsh and hostile back. So by the time you've purified your mind and you can be polite, kind, friendly, respectful to everybody, you'll notice that this is what will come back to you in your day-to-day life. The way that this is accomplished is that you've eliminated what's called craving, anger, and ignorance. This is a high-level way of describing the pollution in the mind. The most deep level of detail that the Buddha describes about the pollutions in the mind, it's referred to as the 10 fetters. What a fetter is that during ancient times, if you were a prisoner or a criminal, they would attach a fetter to your ankle. And this was like a shackle, a chain, and a ball. And now they would have you in a field, and you were confined to that particular area. You couldn't go anywhere else because this ball was keeping you trapped in this particular area. So the Buddha refers to these 10 pollutions as fetters because they're keeping you trapped in the unenlightened state. And he gives you details on what these 10 fetters are, and then what the path to enlightenment is about is eradicating these out of the mind. But when we talk about them from a high level, we describe them as craving, anger, and ignorance. These are referred to as the 3 poisons, or the 3 unwholesome roots, or the 3 fires. And when you're making decisions through these 3 unwholesome roots, it's going to produce unwholesome results for you. So I'll explain to you a little bit about what these are. I sometimes spend an hour and a half in a certain discussion explaining what these are, the symptoms of it, how to eradicate them, and these kinds of things. But I'll just give you a little bit of a taste of what these 3 poisons are, these 3 unwholesome roots. And you'll be able to see that you actually have these 3 unwholesome roots in your own mind. What craving is this is the longing, the yearning, the chasing after the objects of your affection. It's almost like an unquenchable thirst. The mind thinks that satisfaction is going to come from something external. So the mind might chase more money, or it might chase a new car, or it might chase a new job, or it might chase any number of things, maybe a boyfriend or girlfriend or something like this. And the mind just thinks, if I can get this thing, everything's going to be perfect if I can just get this thing, right? If you've ever been in the mall and you're walking down the mall and you look in the window and you're like, oh, new pair of shoes. Oh, yes. Oh, I got to get those. Oh, I want those so badly. This is the craving, desire, attachment. This is the longing, the yearning. There's nothing wrong with having shoes. You need shoes, but it's the mind longing, yearning for it. And if you go in the store and they have your size and you can wear them and you can buy them, you're so happy. But if you go in the store and they don't have your size, you'll feel frustrated and angry. This is the craving. This is the longing. This is the yearning. You're going to understand more about this when we talk about the Four Noble Truths. So this craving is where the mind is longing, yearning, and if it gets what it wants, it gets pleasant feelings like happiness, excitement, elation, thrill, exhilaration, euphoria. But that's short-lived because the mind is basing its inner feelings on some condition. That if I get what I want, I'll be happy. But then when that mind doesn't get what it wants or that thing changes, the mind ends up in the anger, the sadness, or the frustration. That's the next one. When the mind is experiencing anger or any kind of painful feeling, the mind will typically associate these feelings with something external. You might think that somebody external, some person or some situation is causing your mind to be angry. So you might push away the person, or you might push away the situation, thinking that that's going to solve the problem. This is called aversion. So I'm sure you've been in relationships where you falsely attributed your painful feelings to this person. And you thought that if I push this person out of my life, then everything will be just fine. And you might have done that. But now you can see that that didn't actually solve your problem because your mind still gets angry or upset or frustrated or agitated. If this was the cause of the problem, this person, when you push them out of your life, you would be just fine. You would be peaceful for the rest of your life. But that didn't actually solve the problem because it's just a matter of time before you become annoyed or agitated or frustrated again, right? So what the unenlightened mind will do when its anger is arising is it will typically push people or push a situation away, or you'll become bitter, harsh, and hostile through your intentions, your speech, and your actions. This is where it's almost like an animal growling and roaring at another animal, like "Rrr." And then now you're trying to scare that person into doing things your way through your harshness and bitterness and hostility. And that doesn't work either, because those people will typically leave out of your life when you're being harsh and bitter and hostile to them, right? Or at the very least, they're going to be bitter and harsh and hostile to you because you've damaged the relationship. Or the third thing the mind will do is it'll put its expectations on people. When you're feeling these painful feelings, you might put your expectations on people and try to control them and get them to do things your way. Because the mind just thinks, if I can just get people to do things my way, everything will be perfect. Because the mind's trying to get those cravings fulfilled. The mind's trying to get its wants and its expectations fulfilled. So where all of this is coming from, this craving and this anger, is it's coming from this third one, which is referred to as ignorance, but I like to use the phrase unknowing of true reality, or confusion, or misunderstanding, or lack of wisdom. That's what this one is, where the mind just doesn't understand what it doesn't understand. The mind firmly believes in the unenlightened state that other people are causing you to be angry. And I'm going to show you here today that this isn't actually true. But because of this lack of wisdom, this unknowing of true reality, craving continues to exist in the mind and anger continues to arise. So the ignorance is the unknowing of true reality of the natural laws. The mind doesn't understand things like the Four Noble Truths, which I'm going to teach you today. The mind doesn't understand in the unenlightened state the Eightfold Path, or the natural law of Gotama, or any of these other teachings that are going to guide you to fully awakening to understanding the true reality of the world and how the world functions through these natural laws. So that's what the mind is ignorant to. It's ignorant to these natural laws. And as long as it's unknowing of these natural laws, craving and anger will continue to exist. So even though we call it craving, anger, and ignorance, it's really because of ignorance that craving and anger continues to exist and the mind stays stuck. And this is why what you're going to hear me talk about is that you can't believe any of the teachings of the Buddha. Because what you need to be able to do in order to transform this is you need to get to wisdom. You need to be able to know with 100% certainty through independent verification what is true reality. You need to be able to get to the truth. And the only way you can get to wisdom and get to the truth is to not believe any of the teachings. So I'm going to explain this to you where you can cultivate wisdom. Now you can transform this ignorance into wisdom, and you can fully eradicate craving and anger. And through eradicating all of these three unwholesome roots, you can now purify your mind and experience the peace and joy of the enlightened mental state. So by the time someone eliminates craving, anger, and ignorance, the mind is actually enlightened. They're going to experience this enlightened mental state. And this is a gradual progression. It's not like you're unenlightened 1 second and then 2 seconds later you're enlightened. It's not an instantaneous thing. It's a gradual training, gradual practice, and gradual progress that you're gradually making your way to enlightenment. The way you might even think about this is that your mind is already enlightened, but you've got these pollutions that are hindering you from experiencing it. It's kind of like the sun is there and it's got clouds in front of it. And when the clouds start peeling away, the rays of the sun start shining through. And this is the same thing that's true as you're getting closer and closer to enlightenment. That as you're peeling away this pollution of the mind, the qualities of enlightenment start to shine through more and more in the mind. So this is why sometimes as people are getting closer and closer to enlightenment, you can go like a month or two where you haven't experienced any discontentedness at all. And then you'll have some discontentedness. And then you can go 2 or 3 or 4 months without any discontentedness. And you'll have some discontentedness. It'll be very light. It'll be very insignificant, but you'll have some discontentedness. So you'll see these qualities of enlightenment starting to shine through as you're gradually making your way to enlightenment. And eventually, it'll be 6 months, 1 year, 2 years, 3 years. You haven't experienced any discontentedness whatsoever. And you'll know that your mind's enlightened because your mind is only experiencing peace and joy because you've eradicated these pollutions and there's no longer any causes and conditions that are producing the discontent feelings. So it's through eliminating and eradicating these 3 poisons, or in more detail, the 10 fetters, that is going to produce the enlightened mind. some more about what the teachings of the Buddha are, is he's helping you to understand what's called the natural law of Gotama. I refer to all the natural laws as the natural laws of existence. There's actually multiple natural laws that the Buddha is teaching you as part of his teachings. But there's one natural law called the natural law of Gotama that he's helping you understand in the most detail. This is helping you see this cause and effect, or this action and result, where you're able to actively understand certain causes and conditions that are leading to any particular result. And if you make wise decisions, you'll experience wholesome results, or wholesome Gotama. And when you make unwise decisions, you're going to experience unwholesome results, or unwholesome Gotama. This word Gotama, if it translated to just one English word, I would just use that because it'd be easier for everybody, but it doesn't. So I still need to use this word Gotama. You might have heard the word karma being used. This is a very popular version of this word. It's from the Sanskrit language, the word karma, but the original teachings of the Buddha are in the Pali language. So we use the word Gotama. It's the same thing, pointing to the same thing, referring to the same thing, just a different word. What it means is cause and effect, or action and result. It's the results of your decisions. That when you make decisions wisely, you're going to experience wholesome results, or wholesome Gotama. And when you make decisions unwisely, you're going to experience unwholesome results, or unwholesome Gotama. This natural law of Gotama, it's not mystical or magical. There's no being who's overseeing it. It's not punishments and rewards. It's not even about who's at fault or who's to blame. It's essentially a sequence of events, right? So I'll give you an example. At some point, you guys must have got a job, and you must have worked, and you made money. And because you learned English, you were able to get a job, or whatever language you speak when you're at work. Because you went to school, you were able to get a job. And by getting a job, you were able to get money. And by getting money, you were able to purchase clothing. And by purchasing clothing, you could come outside and you could have friends and you could talk to people. This is a cause and effect, cause and effect, cause and effect, a sequence of events, right? It's not about punishments and rewards, but you've experienced wholesome Gotama, because now, because of your decisions to work and make money, you were able to afford things like clothing and food and shelter and medical care and things like this. And that's why you're able to now sit here at the temple, because of this sequence of events that has occurred. Right? So this is Gotama. And the Buddha is going to teach you throughout all of his teachings certain decisions that you make that lead to wholesome results, and certain decisions that you make that lead to unwholesome results. And the more wisdom that you have of this natural law, you're going to naturally make wise decisions, right? So what you're doing on this path to enlightenment is you're learning these teachings, you're examining them, and you're investigating them. Then you reflect on these teachings to independently verify them. And I'm going to show you how to do this with the Four Noble Truths. Then you practice the teachings, integrating them into your life so that now you can experience the results through training your mind. You're awakening to these natural laws that the Buddha didn't explain to you the way the world should be, and that if everybody follows certain rules or commandments, the world's going to become a peaceful place. Instead, what he's doing is he's explaining to you the way the world is. Because when your mind's angry or sad or frustrated, it's because you live in a world that you don't understand. You're struggling, you're having difficulties in the world. And because the mind doesn't understand the way the world is, it will continue to struggle and have difficulties. So the Buddha didn't explain this perfect world, and now let's teach everybody these rules to follow. That's not what he actually did. He's explaining to you the way the world is. So when you understand these natural laws, now you can navigate the world. Because if everybody has to practice these teachings in order for you to get peaceful, now your mind is dependent on other people to do something in order for you to gain peace. But the way that the Buddha taught is that you gain peace on your own through your own training of your mind. Your peace and your joy isn't dependent on other people and what other people are doing. So he's explaining to you the way the world is. So he's training your mind to experience this complete joy through acquiring wisdom of these natural laws of existence. And when you're awakening to these natural laws, it's just like you did with the natural law of gravity, that at one time, none of us understood the natural law of gravity. And because of that, we struggled. We had difficulties. We fell down. We hit our head. We bumped our elbows. We broke our toys. We struggled with this natural law of gravity. We were 2 years old, 3 years old, 4 years old. We had all kinds of problems because we lacked wisdom of this natural law of gravity. But then slowly but surely over time, we gradually awoke. We gained wisdom of this natural law of gravity. So by the time we were 10, 12, 14 years old, we started making different decisions. And because we were making different decisions, more wise decisions produced more wholesome results. We don't fall down anymore the way we used to. We don't cry and struggle and have difficulties because we understand the natural law of gravity. And when you understand a natural law, you're going to naturally make wiser decisions. Like, for example, this cup behind me, I've had this cup back here now for many years as I teach, right? I take sips of water every once in a while. I don't put this glass of water out here in front of me. Not because somebody told me not to, not because of it's a rule or a commandment, but just wisely, the natural law of gravity. I know if I put it there, it's only a matter of time before it gets knocked over, right? I'm going to have spilled water all over the floor. So when you understand a natural law, you're going to naturally make wiser decisions to do things like put this glass behind me, and then I won't knock it over, right? So as you don't have wisdom of the natural law of Gotama or these natural laws, you're going to be out in the world making unwise decisions without even realizing it because you don't have wisdom of this natural law. Just like when we were growing up, we made unwise decisions about the natural law of gravity and we didn't understand. We kept being affected by this natural law of gravity, whether we were aware of it or not. We didn't know about the natural law of gravity, and it still affected us. The same thing is true about these natural laws. They're affecting you, whether you're aware of it or not. But the more wisdom that you have of these natural laws, now that wisdom, you can make wise decisions that's going to produce wholesome results. So that's what you're working to do on this path, is gradually awaken to the wisdom of these natural laws. And this is slowly going to help you to eradicate certain pollutions in the mind, because that's part of what you need to learn is what are the pollutions that are in the mind. The teachings of the Buddha are timeless, that he spoke very clear, very concise, and very precise. Because he's describing these natural laws, and these natural laws haven't changed, that's why his teachings are timeless. His teachings aren't stuck in this cultural past. Sometimes people try to think that way, but this is someone who hasn't actually studied and understood his teachings closely. His teachings are describing these natural laws to you. He's not describing rules or commandments. He's just helping you to understand what these natural laws are. And because these natural laws are the same natural laws that existed 2,500 years ago, when you look at his teachings today, you can see they're just as applicable today as they were 2,500 years ago. So his teachings are actually timeless. He spoke in a way that allows you to apply his teachings today, just like they did 2,500 years ago. And his teachings are very clear, very concise, and very precise. You don't have to interpret his words. You don't have to figure out what he was saying. It's very clear and very precise. He does teach about the cycle of rebirth. You can see this in his teachings. He teaches about hell, the animal realm, the afflicted spirit realm, the human realm, and the heavenly realm. And he teaches about this for a reason. The reason why he teaches it is because it's true, and you can actually independently verify it. Just like everything else in his teachings, there's no belief. You never believe the cycle of rebirth. Don't ever believe it. Right now, you might believe that you only have one life, but you don't have any evidence to prove that you only have one life. Just maybe because right now you can't remember your previous lives, but you don't have any independently verifiable evidence that you only have one life. But as you learn and you practice the teachings of the Buddha, you can get to the point where there's independently verifiable evidence to verify the 5 realms of existence and the cycle of rebirth, that we continuously are reborn over and over and over again. Now, when someone first starts learning the path to enlightenment, I don't suggest that they approach the cycle of rebirth as the first thing that they learn, and neither did the Buddha. The Buddha taught what I'm going to teach you today, which is the Four Noble Truths, as the very first teaching. But this cycle of rebirth is something that you'll come to understand, and you're able to approach it and understand it in a way to independently verify it. So the reasons why he taught it, in addition to it being true, is that as you're learning and practicing on this path, you might actually get to a point where you observe your past lives. That as you're getting rid of the pollution out of your mind, you might actually start having memories of your past lives. If you didn't understand the cycle of rebirth and you started having these vivid memories of your past lives, this could really shake you up. Let's just say you're having vivid memories of being murdered, right? Or dying a horrible death. And it was so vivid and so real. Of course, it didn't happen in this life because you're still alive, this could really shake you up. Or say you had some memories of being sexually abused in the past, or something like this from a past life, and you know that didn't happen in this life. This could really shake you up if you didn't understand that this was a past life experience. And you can train your mind to let that go and just not hold on to it. So this is one of the other reasons why the Buddha taught the cycle of rebirth, is because you might actually start recalling your past lives, and this will help you to gain stability and stableness. Some of the other reasons why he taught the cycle of rebirth and the 5 realms of existence is that as you're moving to this higher consciousness and you have less and less pollution in your mind, you might experience communication from beings from these other realms. Sometimes we think about hell as being deep down into the core of the earth, or heaven being way far off in the sky somewhere. These beings are actually in the same time and space as us. We're actually right here in the same time and space. So just like a human being is sitting in this chair, if I got up and left, an animal could come and sit in this chair too, right? A squirrel, a dog, something else like that. Well, these other beings, hell, the afflicted spirits, and the heavenly beings, they're formless beings, meaning they don't have physical form, but they're all right here in the same time and space as us. So you might actually experience communication with these beings, where they're actually able to communicate with you. So if you were at a restaurant and there was a person 2 tables over, they were talking really loud, that human being, you could tune them out and you wouldn't pay attention to what they were saying, and you would just focus on your conversation with the person in front of you. But when you're hearing these voices of beings that you can't see, you might think you're going crazy if you didn't understand the cycle of rebirth and that these are beings from other realms. And you can train your mind to just not pay attention to that, and that you don't need to take that in. And then the third reason why he taught this is that you might actually see these beings, the hell beings, the afflicted spirits, and the heavenly beings. Even though they don't have physical form, some people, as they're moving closer and closer to enlightenment and their minds becoming more pure, you can actually see hell beings, afflicted spirits, and heavenly beings. And again, if you didn't understand the truth of the way the world is, when you saw these beings, it could really shake you up. So the Buddha is explaining the cycle of rebirth and these 5 realms for a reason, because this is the way the world is. It's the truth. And then as you get closer and closer to learning and practicing, you might decide that you would like to explore this. So usually about 1.5 years, 2 years into a student's development, that's when they're usually starting to approach the cycle of rebirth. Out of this 13-book series, Volume 11 is all about the realms of existence. And it's Volume 11 for a reason, because there's a lot of other things that are helpful for you to learn. But I'll just give you a couple of little things that you can look at that you might not have attributed to the cycle of rebirth. If you've ever heard of an individual who has deja vu, or if you've had deja vu is where you're having some experience and it seems very familiar to you, and you just know that you've experienced this thing before, but you know it wasn't in this life. This is your residual memories from your previous life bubbling up to the surface of the mind. And usually when these things happen, it's usually just for a few seconds, and we kind of discount it, and we kind of push it to the side, and we kind of ignore it. But this is your residual memories surfacing to the surface of your mind. Or if you've ever heard of like a child prodigy, someone who's like 4 years old or 6 years old, who's never seen a piano a day in their life, and they walk over to a piano and they put their hands on the piano and they can play masterful piano. This is a child having previous memories from their previous life, and now they've never even seen a piano, but they can play masterful piano. So these are the kinds of things that can occur when you understand the cycle of rebirth, that you understand this is exactly why this is occurring, that it's not some magical thing. It's not like some talent was bestowed on this 6-year-old child. It's that this 6-year-old child was most likely a masterful pianist in the past, and now in this current life, they're having residual memories of their past life, and they can play masterful piano, even though they've never seen a piano in this life. Right? So these are the kinds of things that are occurring in the world, and you can look at them and they can be explained through the cycle of rebirth. But that's just a little bit. There's about 17 different ways to independently verify the cycle of rebirth, which is in volume 11 by the time somebody gets there. So the Buddha did teach about God. Sometimes people think that the Buddha didn't teach about God. You'll hear some people say that the Buddha rejected God, or the Buddha denied the existence of God. This is just individuals who haven't actually read and studied the original words of the Buddha. The Buddha did teach about this being of God, but he didn't put God at the center of his teachings, because it's not God who determines whether you get to enlightenment or not. It's your decisions that determine whether you get to enlightenment or not. So he didn't put God at the center of his teachings. He put you at the center of his teachings, because it's you that's learning and practicing. So there isn't any worship or prayer or something like this towards God. He does teach about this being because people believed in this being during his lifetime. So he taught about this being, and then you can learn about that being or not. So this being isn't the one who determines whether you get to enlightenment or not. So that's why the Buddha didn't put him at the center of his teachings. He's teaching you how to get to this enlightened mental state and freedom from these strong feelings. But there is teachings about God, but he just doesn't teach you to pray or worship to this being or anything like that. Okay? And then some additional things about what the teachings of the Buddha are is that there's this book, or actually multiple books, called the Pali Canon. This is the largest, most complete collection of the teachings of the Buddha. It's referred to as the Pali Canon. And the reason why is because it's written in the Pali language. This is the historical language that has been capturing the teachings of the Buddha. There's 45 volumes of books. It's about this thick, each individual volume. So the Buddha lived for 45 years. So there's a large collection of books that are actually describing what he actually taught during his lifetime. We refer to this as the Pali Canon. And what this does is it documents the discourses that he gave during his life, because during his life, everything was oral. They were teaching orally, that he just spoke, and then people remembered his teachings and they chanted his teachings to commit them to the memory, and then they practiced his teachings in order to get to enlightenment. But after his death, the technology to write things down had made its way to that part of the world. So they started documenting his teachings after his death. And by the time you get to enlightenment, you have a very clear, very crisp mind. And whatever it took for you to get to enlightenment, you will never forget those teachings ever. So the people that actually got to enlightenment, 500 of them, out of the countless people that got to enlightenment, 500 of them got together shortly after the death of the Buddha, and they documented his teachings in order to preserve them for future generations. And that's what we refer to as the Pali Canon. So this Pali Canon is 45 volumes of books. And these 45 volumes of books have been largely inaccessible to the average person up until now. The reason why is because to print out this, for like a Thai person, it's about 3 months of your salary if you were to print out these 45 volumes of books. And there's probably not any book collection that you own that's that's worth 3 months of your salary. So the average Thai person doesn't have a collection of the Pali Canon. Even the average temple doesn't have access to the Pali Canon because it's just so voluminous and it's so costly to print it out. But what this book series does is it consolidates it into 13 books, and then we make it free for you to download, so that way there isn't any financial barrier for you to get access to the words of the Buddha. So you can download it for free. You can take it and go print it if you like. You can get printed versions here at the temple just by reimbursing us for the printing cost, or you can order it on Amazon if you'd like to get access to it through Amazon. So these are all the different ways that you can now get access to it. Because these 45 volumes of books, the reason why they're so voluminous is the Buddha taught in repetition. That when you're teaching in an oral tradition, there's kind of 3 ways to get people to remember your teachings. The first one is you tell stories, because people will remember stories. So this is why you see the Buddha teaching it through stories, because you'll kind of remember the moral of the story. The second way you get people to remember your teachings is you give them lists. This is why we have like the 5 precepts, the 7 factors of enlightenment, the 10 fetters, the Eightfold Path, these kinds of things. Because if you remember, say, 4 out of the 5 things on the list, you're going to know, like, there's one more. There's one more. What is it? We know the 4. What's the other one? What's the other one? Ah, it's that. Right? So if you give people lists, they'll tend to remember your teachings. And then the third way you get people to remember an oral tradition is you speak in repetition. You say the same things over and over and over and over again. So this is the way that the Buddha taught, is he told stories, he gave lists, and he repeated things over and over and over again. So these 45 volumes of books, there's a lot of repetition in it. So we can consolidate it nowadays, strip out the repetition, and that's what has been assembled into these 13 books. And then we make it available to people at no cost so that you can download it for free. You can take it and go print it. You can get printed versions here, just reimbursing teaching us, and then it's a lot less expensive for you to be able to actually get access to the words of the Buddha to train your mind. Essentially, what the teachings of the Buddha are, is it's to heal from what hurt you so that you never need to hurt ever again. This is the way that I think about the teachings of the Buddha, that he's teaching you how to do this inner work within your own mind so that you can heal from what hurt you so that you never need to hurt ever again. In the unenlightened state with a lack of wisdom, we will perceive what's hurting us as being something on the outside. You might think that what's hurting you is on the outside. And now you might feel like you need to fix the outside world. But as long as you're doing that, you're not going to actually be able to get to peace and joy, because you can't fix the outside world. You can't go around and teach every single person to do things a certain way. So what the Buddha is teaching you to do is look inward and focus on the real problem, which was inside the mind. So you can heal from what hurt you, and then you'll never need to hurt ever again. You'll never experience painful feelings ever again once the mind gets to enlightenment. So this is the way that I think about the teachings of the Buddha, is to heal from what hurt you so that you never need to ever hurt ever again. So this is what the teachings of the Buddha are. Do you guys have any questions about what his teachings are? If you guys have questions here, we have microphones in the white bowl. That way the people online will be able to hear. And then for those of you guys online, you can ask questions through Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom. Just put that in the comment section. Or in Zoom, you can raise your hand and ask any questions that you like. So, sir, you have a question? Would you mind getting a microphone there? There's a gray button on the front. You just press it, and then the lights will come on, and you just hold it up to your chin. And then you can keep it with you because you might have more than one question.
So I've also heard, in addition to there being 5 realms, there being like 30 realms. And wondering your perspective on that.
Sure. You'll see different people that will say different things about the teachings of the Buddha because of what we call impermanence, which you're going to learn about here in a bit, that things are constantly changing. People have changed his teachings over the years, that because it started out as an oral tradition, it stays that way for a really long time. Even now, there are certain temples that just teach orally. And when you have an oral tradition, it's very easy for things to get changed, either overtly changed or inadvertently changed, and people modify and change his teachings. But when you look at the Pali Canon, which is the largest, most complete source that we have that documents his teachings, you can see in there that he taught 5 realms. You'll hear people say 6 realms or 8 realms or 32 realms or any number of realms. So you can look at the Pali Canon, and then you don't believe it, you can actually independently verify it. So I've independently verified for myself these 5 individual realms, that these are the 5 realms of existence. But you're going to hear people that say different numbers because of this change that has happened over 2,500 years. Some people have either overtly changed his teachings or inadvertently changed his teachings. And changing the teachings of a Buddha is like the most detrimental thing you could ever do. It's going to cause harm to you, and it's going to cause harm to many people, because now a Buddha during their lifetime is putting these lights down along the path to make it very clear for people what it takes to get to enlightenment. And if someone changes his teachings, it's like knocking over these lights and making it so that it's harder and harder for people to be able to see what it takes to be able to get to enlightenment.
Thank you. And one quick follow-up question. So for the volumes that that have been consolidated, who were the individuals who did that consolidation, and what was the discretion that went into it?
Sure. There's a team of people down in Bangkok that are at this temple called Wat Tung, that this temple is really well known for teaching the words of the Buddha in the Thai language. They speak in Thai language and they teach in Thai language. And they did some work in order, about 100 people, they looked through the Pali Canon, they extracted the most important teachings. And then what happened is I received versions of these books, not these, but a version that they had created. And then when I saw what was being shared in these books, I then updated the word choices, because some of the word choices weren't accurate. They were using words that didn't necessarily communicate what the Buddha was actually trying to communicate. And there was actually 4 to 6 different translators that had translated these books. So one translator was using one word, another translator was using another word, another translator was using another word, and it was very hard for the average reader to figure out what was actually connecting. So what I did is I spent 5 months just bringing these books into an electronic format. And then I took another year or so to format the text and update the word choices, put my words in, the references and these kinds of things, so that now what I've put together is what I know with 100% certainty will lead to enlightenment. That these particular chapters is what's going to lead somebody to deeply understanding the full path to enlightenment. So that's why I share it, because I know that this is what led to where I am today with the mind that I'm experiencing. And if it led to this for me, it'll lead to the same thing for you.
Okay, yeah. So there's a lot of nuance in word choice, and there is always inherently going to be discretion when there is translation. And what's represented here is your discretion based on your subjective understanding of truth and what leads to enlightenment, and these are reflective of that, to my understanding.
I wouldn't describe it in the same way as you. Okay. For me, I'm not subjective to this, but I know what has led to where I am today and what I used to experience in the past and what I experience today. And instead of believing what the Buddha taught, I looked at the words, I could see what it is that was being shared. I understood what the word choices were. And then I selected word choices that I knew that were going to be more reflective of what it is that is describing the natural laws. And now, since I created this book series over 5 years ago, I think it's been now 5 or 6 years, there's been countless students that have been learning and practicing with these teachings, and they're experiencing all kinds of magnificent benefits. This is one of the reasons why people brought me down to Mexico, because the one student there has been learning with me for 1.5 years. She's seen a complete transformation in her life, and she's willing to spend multiple thousands of dollars to bring me down to Mexico and share the teachings with other people. So what I'm sharing here has been tried and tested and proven over several years, and not just with me, but with other students as well. And it's producing results and benefits. There's just story after story after story after story after story of students that are experiencing improvement in their condition of their mind and to the condition of their life. So I have 100% confidence in this book series. Of course, you haven't even probably read the first page, so you don't have that same confidence. But should you ever decide someday to actually investigate the teachings here, you'll be able to gain that confidence as well.
Thank you.
You're welcome. You have a question?
I'm a little bit confused about the 5 realms and verifying this.
I'm not sure if the mic's on.
Is it? I think it's on, no?
Is it on? Okay, maybe I'm just not hearing it.
Yeah, so I'm a bit confused about the 5 realms and how to verify this. You say this comes later in the path. For me, it's very far from what I can understand and from my science background and things like that.
Sure.
So you said you verified this. So how did you verify this, and how do you know if someone else says, I don't know about this with 30 realms, like that they didn't in this path experience that there were actually 30 realms? How do you know that the 5 realms is truth and the 30 realms is not the truth? Or
yeah, the way that I know is that I've had contact with beings in each of these 5 realms, and I have recall of memory from being in some of these realms. And you can see in volume 11, chapter 105, you can see the 17 different ways that I explain how to verify the cycle of rebirth. So when you see what people are representing as 30 realms or 32 realms or 9 realms, you'll see that they're just really far out. And these particular realms, I verify each individual one through my own experience of having communication with beings in these realms. That's what I shared with you guys as possible, with being able to see these beings, being able to see them through your eyes, and being able to recall past lives as well, and be able to observe past lives. So all the things that I'm teaching you, this isn't something that somebody told me or that I read in a book somewhere. The things that I'm sharing with you are things that I experienced through my own direct experience. And I know that if I experience these things, you'll experience the same things potentially as you're learning and practicing and training your mind. And like I mentioned, there's students who have been learning with me for multiple years, and as their pollution is being cleared out of the mind, this is where people will sometimes see past lives. Not everybody experiences that, but some people do. Some people experience communication with beings from these other realms, and then some people experience visually being able to see these beings as well. So these are some of the ways that I've independently verified this, and this is something that you may experience as well. But this isn't the first thing to be able to learn. But here as an introduction, I teach you and help you to understand that this is part of the teachings, because you're going to see this as the Buddha is teaching you at different times. You're going to see him talk about the cycle of rebirth occasionally. But the time to really dive into that is when you get to volume 11. But you're going to see things here and there about that. Even in volume 1, I start introducing people to the cycle of rebirth just a little bit. In chapter 20, I think it is, I start to introduce people to it a little bit. So I've independently verified it through my own experience of being able to see these beings, communicate with these beings, and be able to observe past lives.
Okay, thank you. Then my follow-up question is, how do you know when it's not just a dream and when it is actually something from a past life? How do you know this?
Yeah.
You know?
So it's not just like one situation, right? So the earliest thing that happened to me is when I was 8 years old, I started having pains in the body, because ultimately what I was able to observe over multiple experiences is that I was actually murdered in my previous life. Not in this life, of course, because I'm still alive, but in the previous life. And I had aches and pains in my body from that murder that took place in the previous life. I didn't piece it together at the age of 8. But at the age of 8, I had excruciating pains in my legs, and I would cry out to my parents as I was going to sleep. And they would come to try to see me and try to figure out what was going on with me. And I was able to eventually, that was able to be eliminated. But over the course of my life, I had multiple situations where there was vivid memories that were coming to my mind. There were even times when I was speaking as if I was these people in the past. And at the time, when I was here in Thailand and I was speaking as if I was these beings from the past, they understood what was going on, and they just talked to me as if I was these people. And then within 20, 30 minutes, an hour, I kind of snapped out of it. And then my mind was back to David again. So there was multiple experiences over time. They were too vivid and too real and too actual. It's not a dream. I know what is true and what is false. You guys don't know all of my background and everything that I've experienced in my life. But this isn't something that I can give you and I can say, here's how you can independently verify that I independently verified that the cycle of rebirth is true. So instead, what I do is I invite you to learn the teachings slowly but surely, starting out with the first teachings. And then by the time you get to volume 11, chapter 105, you can see the 17 different ways to independently verify the cycle of rebirth. If you'd like to look at it ahead of time, you're more than welcome to jump into it at any point. That's why I tell people what volume and what chapter it's in. But getting into the cycle of rebirth early on, it's not going to produce what it is that you're looking to get to, which is the elimination of discontent feelings. And looking at the cycle of rebirth oftentimes just stands in the way of somebody being able to understand the true teachings. Because what's happened in the past, it's in the past. It doesn't matter now. What may or may not happen in the future, it's in the future. It doesn't matter. Right now, your mind is experiencing discontentedness, and you'd like to overcome that. You'd like to eliminate it if you're interested in doing that. And it's starting at the very beginning of the path that's going to help you to do that. The cycle of rebirth isn't the beginning of the path. Yeah. But people usually get really interested to understand this kind of stuff. You have a question?
So, speaking about the similar theme, how will you go with someone who has diagnosed bipolar disorder, and if they've mentioned that they can perceive some of these entities or some of these influences, how it's not necessarily what would you recommend, but how would you go with someone with these characteristics?
Sure. What people are describing today as mental illness, in a lot of cases, is just the mind is not trained. So bipolar disorder, where the mind's going up and down and up and down. This is just the mind that's not trained, that the mind is experiencing craving, desire, attachment. It's chasing after the objects of its affection. It gets really excited when it gets certain things. And then all of a sudden it drops off into depression, or what we call depression. Things like schizophrenia, like PTSD, ADHD, ADD, bulimia, anorexia, all these different things, they can all be explained through the teachings of the Buddha, and through training your mind, you can actually eliminate all those symptoms. So at one time, I used to take medicine for 24 years. I took medicine because people where I used to live diagnosed me with having bipolar disorder and some other things like this. And I used to have all kinds of trouble sleeping and focusing and all these kinds of things. But when I trained my mind with the teachings of the Buddha, I was able to eliminate all these symptoms. And I was able to eliminate all the medication too. And the mind has never been more stable than it is now. I no longer experience any anger or sadness or frustration or any of these discontent feelings. When I'm speaking here about a mental state, I'm not speaking about it because this is what somebody told me. This is what I have come to understand through my own experiences. And bipolar disorder and all these other things, it's just a misunderstanding that today people are thinking that this is like a defective brain, and that the brain is actually defective. Now, while the anguish and the challenges that person is experiencing is 100% real, the reason why it's occurring isn't because of a defective brain. So what people are doing is going in with chemicals and trying to tweak brain chemistry, where the brain is one thing and the mind is something completely different. And if you're tweaking brain chemistry, you're not going to be able to clean up the mind. What the Buddha is teaching you to do is clean up the mind. The mind is non-physical, it's intangible. But what doctors are doing today is they're tweaking brain chemistry. And sometimes this is actually needed, particularly if someone's in like psychosis or something like this, if you're familiar with what psychosis is, that in that situation, you need medication to be able to come out of the psychosis. But once somebody's out of the psychosis, the medication isn't going to eliminate your sadness or your frustration or your agitation or your stress or your anxiety. Nowadays, people take medicine for stress and anxiety. What I'm going to show you with the Four Noble Truths is what's causing these feelings, and then you'll actually be able to understand how to eliminate them. And it's not tweaking brain chemistry that's going to do that. So someone who's been diagnosed with a medical condition of bipolar disorder or any of these others, they can actually get complete solution with the teachings of the Buddha. And this is another thing that current students, it's not just me that has experienced this, but current students who are studying with me, they've been learning and practicing and training their mind, and they're getting off their medications too. And the doctors are even supporting them to do it, because the doctors are being able to see like, wow, your mind's so stable and so steady. Like, what are you doing? And they're like, oh, I've been studying the teachings of the Buddha for the last 6 months and training my mind. And by the way, I'd like to get off my medication. The doctors are fully supporting it because they're seeing the improvement to the condition of the mind. So a person who's currently diagnosed with some of these issues, if they learn and practice, they can actually get to the point where these things get resolved and get eliminated from the mind. Yeah, you have more? Yeah.
This is more like a personal question for you. Mm-hmm. I understand what you're saying about your personal story and having these moments that prove that there is something else that is just not coincidences or anything like that. Mm-hmm. I've personally experienced a few of these. But even when I have had similar experiences like astral projections or out of body experiences, and through my life I've had these different experiences and contacts. I constantly doubt. Mm-hmm. Is there any time, or was there any time for you on which you just stopped having doubts that these contacts or these teachings or these principles work for you?
Yeah, this is actually one of those 10 fetters that the Buddha taught, one of the 10 pollutions. One of them is called doubt. where you doubt that the Buddha even existed. You doubt his teachings. You doubt the community that you're part of. You might doubt your teacher and whether the teacher has the ability to guide you to enlightenment. You might doubt your ability to get to enlightenment. This is called doubt. And what you're doing is you're learning and investigating the teachings as you're reflecting on them to independently verify, and you're practicing them, and you see the transformation happening to your mind and in your life. You'll get to the point where you have no doubt. Initially, people have doubt when they first get on the path. I had doubt, but the way that you eliminate doubt is not through blind belief or through faith. What you do is you roll up your sleeves, you sink your teeth into the teachings, you investigate them, you reflect on them to verify them, and then you practice them. And that's where you see the truth, because the condition of your mind's gradually improving and the condition of your life's gradually improving. So by the time you get to what we call the first stage of enlightenment, you won't have doubt anymore in the teachings of the Buddha, because you will have seen too much progress, because you will have seen what your mind was like off the path to enlightenment to all that work that you've done to get to the first stage of enlightenment. And you'll know. You won't be enlightened yet, but you'll know without a doubt it's these teachings that are leading you to enlightenment, because you've seen all the progress to the condition of your mind. Yeah. You have another question?
Can past lives be from the future?
No. If you're experiencing past lives, this is memories that you're having from the past. Because as your mind moves into different existences, you can retain residual memories from your past lives. So in a current life, you're having memories of your past life. So if something hasn't happened yet, you're not going to have memories of that. So any kind of past life experiences that you're having are memories. It's from your past, not from the future. But there is the ability for some people to be able to know the future before it's happened. And it's not because there's a destiny or fate. It's that your mind is able to see a certain point in the future that is occurring. But that's different than observing your past lives.
Yeah. The question is trying to get a Buddhist understanding of time, and whether they see it as something linear, or if there's some kind of timelessness or beyond time, or some illusion about time.
No, that's not anything that the Buddha taught. All there really is in terms of time is right now. That's all there is, right? The clock that we use, the calendar that we use, that's just to keep our affairs in order. So I could say Saturday, October 5th at 1 p.m., we have a 3-hour course, and you guys all know when Saturday, October 5th at 1 p.m. is, and you can all show up at the same time. That's the only reason why we have a calendar and a clock. But in reality, in terms of time, all we have is right now. That's it. The past no longer exists. The future hasn't happened yet. All we have is right now. But now we just use the calendar and the clock in order to organize our affairs, and that's it. All right, so now let's move on to the next piece. Actually, it looks like Junko has a question. Go ahead, ma'am.
Thank you so much. Thank you for the lecture. They're really interesting. Always. So my question is to know Buddha better. So I wonder if he remember his old past life, a previous life. So because he reversed the prince in a royal family. So maybe intentionally, so he was born in a royal family. But anyway, so I wonder if he remembers all his previous life, because I think you mentioned he had a unlimited capacity of the memories. So, but I never heard about Buddha, how he had the number of life, and then how he remember what's his previous life. So if there's some episode about it, I like you to share.
Is your question, Junko, how did the Buddha remember his past lives?
Yeah, and if he remember and how it was like.
Okay, sure. So yeah, there's documentation in the Pali Canon where the Buddha is talking about his previous lives because the students asked him about it and he shared about his previous lives. That's how he understood these 5 realms, because he existed in all of these 5 realms at different times throughout all of his countless lives. And he could recall these realms based on his past lives, because a mind that is moving from one life to the next, each mind is a unique mind, but it's actually retaining certain residual memories from your previous lives. So I'll explain this to you guys. So say there's cardboard box A, and this cardboard box A has certain contents in it. And now there's cardboard box B, okay? Cardboard box A represents the mind of the first life, for example. And now at the end of this life, the cardboard box is going to fall away. The cardboard box is impermanent, but the contents are still there. The cravings and residual memories. And now those cravings and residual memories go into this cardboard box B, because the contents have to go into a cardboard box. And now cardboard box B is this new being, this new mind, and now this new being can remember things from the previous life because it has these residual memories. So the Buddha had experienced this accumulation of memories over countless lives, so that in his last life, when he became a Buddha, he was able to recall the things that occurred in his previous lives. And that's how he was able to describe the realms and the cycle of rebirth and all the other teachings that led to his peace and his joy that he experienced in the enlightened mind. Okay. All right, I'm not seeing any other questions anywhere. So now the way that I teach and kind of my teaching style is, once I explain to you what something is, I also explain to you what something isn't. This is a way to help you understand what something is. So I'm going to explain to you guys what the teachings of the Buddha aren't. The teachings of the Buddha aren't a collection of beliefs. They're not a collection of doctrine or concepts or opinions or views. Sometimes that's the way people look at a collection of teachings like this. This isn't what the Buddha actually did. He's not giving you beliefs or opinions or views. This isn't what he's talking about. He's not talking about concepts. He's teaching you the natural laws of things that you can actually independently verify. So his teachings aren't a collection of beliefs that if you believe in these things, that you're going to get this pleasant afterlife. And if you don't believe in these things, you're going to get an unpleasant afterlife. It's not believe, and hope something good happens when you die. And they're also not opinions, and they're not views. They're things that you can independently verify for yourself. His teachings also aren't a religion. Depending on how you think about religion, that if you think about religion as one person at the top of an organization, and then that person is telling everybody else what they should or shouldn't be doing, or if you think about a religion as rites or rituals and ceremonies and worship, or if you think about a religion as rules and commandments that everyone must follow, and if everybody follows these things, the world will become a peaceful place, then the teachings of the Buddha aren't a religion, because there isn't one person at the top of Buddhism telling everybody else what they should or shouldn't be doing. Also, there aren't any rites, rituals, ceremonies, and worship in Buddhism. If you've been to a temple or you've been to a Buddhist place or you've read a book that talks about rites, rituals, ceremonies, and worship, or does rites, rituals, ceremonies, and worship, this isn't what the Buddha actually taught. There aren't any rites, rituals, ceremonies, and worship in his teachings, because his ultimate goal is to help you get to wisdom. That's what's going to transform your mind. And rites, rituals, ceremonies, and worship isn't going to get to wisdom. There isn't any ceremony that you can do that's going to change your life. It's not going to change the way your mind thinks. It's not going to change the wisdom that you have in your mind. Instead, the Buddha didn't teach those things, but you might see people doing rites, rituals, ceremonies, and worship in day-to-day life in a monastery, or even a Buddhist monk might be doing these things, but this isn't what the Buddha actually taught during his life. And there aren't any rules or commandments that people are required to follow. Instead, he's giving you guidance about these natural laws in a way that you can independently verify, and then you can awaken to the wisdom of these natural laws. Some other things that the Buddha's teachings are not is they're not punishments and rewards. Sometimes people focus on those kinds of things, that they think it's about punishments and rewards, but you won't see that in the teachings of the Buddha. He's just helping you understand the natural laws. He's not teaching you about punishments and rewards and things like this. You also won't see mystical or magical things or superstition or auspicious things in his teachings. There's none of that as part of his teachings. It's also, his teachings aren't something to attempt to force others to do or convince other people to do. do. Sometimes when people learn something, they're taught to go out into the world and try to convince other people to do these same things. But what the teachings of the Buddha are doing is they're focusing you on your development, on your mind. This is inner growth and inner development. This is you becoming a better and better human being. This is you evolving to a better and better human being, where you don't need to experience anger and sadness and frustration and these other discontent feelings. Also, the Buddha's teachings aren't these short, catchy phrases that are going to give you some kind of benefit in life. If you ever search social media or things like this, you might see these little short, catchy phrases, and then people will put the word "the Buddha," or "spoken by the Buddha." This isn't true. If you actually look at these short, little catchy phrases, I've looked and researched. 99.9% of the time, the Buddha never actually said these things. It's actually something in modern day that somebody said this and they're just attributing the name of the Buddha in order to give some kind of credibility or credence to what it is that's being shared. So these short little catchy phrases, it's not what the Buddha actually taught. So the teachings of the Buddha, they're not teachings that are stuck in a cultural past that degrades or judges other people. Sometimes people try to attribute that to the Buddha, but you won't see anywhere in the teachings of the Buddha where he's degrading or diminishing other people, because sometimes we think that such a tradition that started 2,500 years ago, perhaps the Buddha denigrated women or minorities or something like this. This isn't actually true. You won't see anywhere in the teachings of the Buddha where he degrades women or minorities. He's actually doing just the opposite. He's teaching people to be respectful and kind and loving and warm and gentle to everybody. He's teaching you how to have harmonious relationships with everyone around you. And he's even teaching people who at that time were considered to be the bottom of society and they were born into a very poor family. He was teaching those people and he was helping them grow and develop and become better and better human beings. There's times in his teachings where there was a murderer who had murdered 999 people. And he accepts this person as a student into his community. There was a female who was a sex worker. He accepts her into his community and teaches her how to get to enlightenment. So he accepted all people into his community and he taught all beings how to be able to get to enlightenment. So his teachings aren't stuck in this cultural past that degrades and denigrates or judges other people. But you might see people talk like this about his teachings, but these are people who are uninformed, that they just haven't actually studied his original teachings. This is just maybe someone gossiping or slandering from one person to the next. Okay, so you guys have any questions on what the teachings of the Buddha are not? Okay, so we've been chatting for about an hour and 45 minutes. I usually give you guys a chance to take a little break at this point. And then when we come back from our break, I'm going to teach you guys the very first teaching of the Buddha. This is the Four Noble Truths. This is where in 4 simple statements, I'm going to teach you what the problem is in the mind, the cause of the problem, the elimination of it, and the path forward. And you're going to be able to independently verify what I'm teaching you. I'm going to teach you why you get angry, why you get frustrated, why you get sad, why you get stressed and have anxiety and all these other feelings. So right now, since it's 2:45, why don't we take a 15-minute break and we'll come back together at 3 o'clock, give you guys a chance to use the restroom, stretch your legs, talk with each other, and then we'll pick it back up in 15 minutes. Okay? All right. Thank you guys for your questions, and we'll chat in about 15 minutes. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and get restarted here, moving into a talk about the Four Noble Truths. But before I talk to you about the Four Noble Truths, I would like to explain to you how to approach the teachings of the Buddha. Now that you have had a little bit of an introduction to them, this is how you would like to approach the teachings of the Buddha. Never believe anything. Don't believe the teachings of the Buddha. You can't believe them. So when I'm teaching you here today, don't believe me. As I teach you, don't believe other people, but don't believe me either. Because with belief, you're not going to know what's true or false. You just either convinced yourself to believe it or someone else convinced you to believe it. You're not interested in believing any of these teachings. You need to be able to learn them, reflect on them, and practice them. You need to independently verify them. And I'm going to show you how to do this as we walk through the teachings. I'm going to do the intellectual learning with you, show you how to examine it and investigate it. I'm going to show you how to reflect on it, and then I'm going to show you how to practice it so that you can experience the cultivation of wisdom and be able to get to know the truth of what is the actual truth. As I mentioned with the Four Noble Truths, you're going to hear these four simple statements that you're going to be able to understand the problem in your mind, the cause of the problem, the elimination of it, and the path forward. You can have a real breakthrough here today. Whereas if you really learn and you take the time to understand, you can actually break through to finally understanding what's causing these discontent feelings. And by doing so, you'll then be able to actually eliminate them. If you don't know what's actually causing these feelings, there's no way for you to actually be able to eliminate them. So just like before, I'm going to pause at different times and open up for questions that if there's any questions that you guys have, you're more than welcome to ask those. So here's what I mean by this about learning, reflecting, and practicing. That I'm going to teach you what's called right view. This is the first step to what's called the Eightfold Path. The Eightfold Path is the core central teaching of the Buddha. And in order to get onto the path to enlightenment, you need to establish right view. It's the Four Noble Truths that's going to help you to establish right view. In order to get to enlightenment, you're going to need to know all of these 8 individual steps. And this is organized into 3 categories: wisdom, moral conduct, and mental discipline. It starts with right view, and then it goes to right intention, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration. Then this right view and right intention form the wisdom section. This is kind of giving you the wisdom that you need to then be able to develop your moral conduct. Whenever you see the Buddha teaching moral conduct, the reason why is because there's certain things that you're doing through your moral conduct, your speech, your actions, and your livelihood that are harmful, that are causing harm to others. And as long as you're causing harm to others, harm's going to keep coming back to you. So he's not teaching you rules or commandments. He's showing you the natural laws of wise moral conduct, that when you purify your speech, your actions, and your livelihood, you won't be causing harm to others, so harm won't be coming back to you. But then you're going to need the mental discipline section in order to be able to implement the moral conduct. So essentially what the Eightfold Path is it's kind of like a speaker system that if you had 8 dials, you would tweak these 8 dials to get a better and better quality sound out of the speakers. Well, the same thing's true about your mind, that if you tweak these 8 individual dials, you're going to get a better and better quality mind and a better and better quality life. So that's what he's teaching you in each one of these steps. And there's a course coming up on Monday that it's a 5-day course that on Tuesday I'm going to be teaching you the entire Eightfold Path using the words of the Buddha. I'm going to walk you through and teach you the entire thing. Today what I'm going to teach you is just this first step because I'm introducing you to the teachings of the Buddha. But ultimately you would need to know all of these. And that's something that I teach in all the programs and courses and retreats because it's such a core central teaching that you would need to know in order to get to enlightenment. So in order to understand the Four Noble Truths and establish right view, you need to first understand what's called the 3 universal truths. We refer to these as truths because the Buddha knew that they were true. I know that they're true, and other people know that they're true. But in order for you to be able to get the benefit, you need to know that they're true. And that's why you're not believing anything that you hear me teaching. I'm going to show you how to investigate and learn and examine something, how to reflect on it to independently verify it, and how to practice it. Starting with this first one, the universal truth of impermanence. What this is teaching you is that things are constantly changing in the world, that there's this constant change. This is what's called a conditioned object. Anything that you see, anything that you hear, anything that you smell, anything that you taste, anything that comes in contact with the body, and anything that goes through the mind is impermanent. It arises, it changes, and it fades away. Remember, the Buddha is explaining to you the way the world is. And what he's explaining to you is the way that the world is that the world is impermanent. Everything around you is constantly changing. These are called conditioned objects. Then there's something called unconditioned objects. An unconditioned object, it doesn't arise, it doesn't change, and it doesn't fade away. Enlightenment is unconditioned. That by the time you get to enlightenment, it doesn't arise, change, or fade away. It's a permanent mental state. In the natural laws of existence themselves, they are unconditioned. They don't arise, they don't change, and they don't fade away. This is why the teachings of the Buddha are timeless, because what he taught 2,500 years ago is just as applicable today, because these natural laws haven't changed. But everything that you see, hear, smell, taste, that comes in contact with the body or that goes through the mind, these things are all impermanent. They're constantly changing. This is a building block to help you understand the Four Noble Truths when we get there. So now what I've just taught you is the universal truth of impermanence. It took me all of about 3 minutes to explain it to you. But you don't believe this. You don't believe it, right? What you need to be able to do is independently verify it. What I'm sharing with you is things are arising, changing, and fading away. Everything around you is impermanent. So now what you do is you say, okay, I understand what is being shared here intellectually, but now let's reflect on it to be able to see if it's true or it's false. What you try to do is you try to look around the world and see if you can find something that's permanent. If you can find something that's permanent, then this isn't a universal truth. And what I suggest that you do in order to do the reflection on this is start with something that you're familiar with. Like this human body. You've been inhabiting this human body for your entire life. So you can ask yourself, is it permanent or is it impermanent? If this human body is permanent, it's been exactly the same your entire life. It's never changed. If it's impermanent, that means it's been constantly changing. So what would you say? Is this body permanent or impermanent? You say impermanent? Impermanent. Okay, you guys are saying that this body is impermanent. Okay, so now let's take something else. What about your relationships? If your relationships are permanent, you've had exactly the same people in your life your entire life. If your relationships are impermanent, that means they've been constantly changing and you've had people coming and going in and out of your life your entire life. So are your relationships permanent or impermanent? They're impermanent, right? People have been coming and going in and out of your life your whole life. What about your bank account? Is your bank account permanent or impermanent? It's impermanent, right? It's going up and down and up and down. Some people's goes up, up, up. Some people's goes down, 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 right? There's constant change. What about the weather? Is the weather permanent or impermanent? What would you say? It's impermanent, right? It's constantly changing. So we could go on and on and on. And you may need to do this in order for you to be able to see the truth that everything around you is impermanent. If you look at the wood floor on the temple here, you've got different colors and shape and textures and size of wood planks. Not one of them is exactly the same. If you look at the walls of the temple, at one time this was probably solid white in a solid wall, but now you see holes, you see marks. This is all impermanence. If you walk down the sidewalk and you see a crack in the sidewalk, that is impermanence. If you look at a fence and you see the paint is fading, that is impermanence. Things are constantly changing in the world around you. This is a building block that's going to help you when we get to the Four Noble Truths. So you're going to need to be able to see the truth of the universal truth of impermanence, that everything around you is constantly changing. So that's the first universal truth. The second universal truth is the universal truth of discontentedness. Some people refer to this as suffering. If you've explored the teachings of the Buddha in other places, you might have heard this referred to as suffering. I don't use this word, and I'll explain to you why in a moment. But first, let me explain to you what this universal truth is. Then I'll circle back and explain to you why I don't use the word suffering. In the original teachings of the Buddha, in the Pali language, they refer to this as dukkha. This is the word that's being used for this particular universal truth. The word dukkha translates as discontent, discontented, and discontentedness. The reason why is because when the Buddha was describing this, he was describing it as pleasant feelings, painful feelings, and neither painful nor pleasant. What he's explaining to you is what the unenlightened mind experiences. What he's saying is the unenlightened mind experiences pleasant feelings like happiness, excitement, elation, thrill, exhilaration, euphoria. The unenlightened mind also experiences painful feelings, feelings like anger, sadness, frustration, irritation, annoyance, guilt, shame, fear, stress, anxiety. These are very painful for the mind to experience. Then you've got neither painful nor pleasant. And for me, I've put boredom and loneliness here, but some people say that's very painful for them. So you could put that into the painful category if you'd like. But shyness is a good example of neither painful nor pleasant. Or say you were on public transportation and somebody came and sat really, really close to you and you didn't know this person. Say your body is touching their body. You might say, it's not painful, it's not pleasant, maybe it's neither painful nor pleasant. It's uncomfortable for you, right? This is what the unenlightened mind is experiencing. These are called conditioned feelings, that based on some condition, your mind experiences a feeling, either pleasant, painful, or neither painful nor pleasant. So for example, in the unenlightened state, you might get so happy when it's sunny outside. This is a conditioned feeling. Based on the condition of the sun, that the sun is present, now the mind is going to be happy, okay? But now that sun is impermanent. And now when it rains, you might become sad or frustrated or agitated based on the condition of rain, that there's some rain that is occurring. So now the mind is forming its inner feeling on some condition. So this is called conditional feelings. Essentially what the unenlightened mind is doing is it's going up and down, up and down, up and down. Okay? So this is what the Buddha is describing as the unenlightened mind. It experiences these three feelings: pleasant feelings, painful feelings, neither painful nor pleasant. But remember, you don't believe it, right? You just learned it intellectually. Now you look to independently verify it because you know your mind is unenlightened. And you ask yourself, is this what you experience? Do you experience conditional feelings that when you experience a certain thing, you get happy about that thing? And then when you experience something else, you get sad about that thing. Are there certain feelings that you experience that doesn't fit into one of these three categories? Because if there's a certain feeling that you experience that doesn't fit into one of these three categories, then this isn't a universal truth. Right? So when we get to the question period, if you think that there's a feeling that you experience that doesn't fit into one of these three categories, let me know and we can talk about it. Because the Buddha is describing to you a universal truth that all unenlightened beings are going to experience these conditional feelings where the mind's going up and down and up and down. By the time you get to enlightenment, your mind is beyond this. Your mind is beyond the conditional experiences. That as an unenlightened being, when you see it's sunny outside, you might get so happy. And now you're like, I'm going to go hiking. I'm going to call up my friends. Let's go out on the trail. Let's go have a great time. This is going to be so much fun. And now you go take a shower. When you come out, you see it's raining outside and you might get frustrated or angry or irritated based on the condition that you got so happy when it was sunny, but now when that changed, your mind experienced the frustration. Right? An enlightened being doesn't experience this. An enlightened being, their mind is beyond this. When they wake up in the morning, they're already happy. When they see it's sunny outside, sweet. Let's go hiking. I'm going to call up my friends, let them know we can all go hiking. We've been interested to do this for a long time. Let's go hiking. So now you go take a shower and you come out and it's raining. Oh, it's raining? Okay, well, I guess we're not going hiking. Guess that means I'm probably going to stay home and read a book, or maybe we'll go to the mall. Maybe we'll go to the movies. Maybe I'll invite my friends over and we'll have dinner at home. I can cook some food for my friends. You're not going to get sad and angry and frustrated because you didn't get so happy and elated because it was sunny. So therefore, you're not going to get sad and frustrated when it's not sunny. You're just going to change your plans, that you don't base your inner feelings on some condition. This will make more sense to you when we talk about the Four Noble Truths. So this is describing the unenlightened mind, that it experiences conditional feelings. So an unenlightened mind is going to get conditional happiness, meaning if this happens and 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 this happens, then you'll be happy. If my mom does this and my dad does this and my brothers and sisters do this and the weather is this and the bank account is this and my boss does this, then I'll be happy, right? So the amount of happiness that you can have becomes less and less and less and less. But by the time you get to enlightenment, you're experiencing unconditioned joy, unconditioned happiness. Your mind doesn't need any condition in order to experience happiness or in order to experience joy. It's just always joyful. It's always happy. You're not basing your inner feelings on some condition. So this is more of what the enlightened mind is experiencing. But this is describing what the unenlightened mind experiences, conditional feelings. There's plenty of happiness in the enlightened mind, but it's just unconditioned happiness. It's not this conditional happiness. The conditional happiness is ultimately unsatisfying because it's temporary. You only can experience happiness as long as that thing is happening. And as long as that's happening, you'll be happy. But when that's gone, you won't be happy anymore, right? So that's dissatisfying and displeasure ultimately. So here, some people refer to this as suffering. You might hear some people refer to the teachings of the Buddha in that way if you've studied them in other places. I don't use the word suffering here because I think the word suffering describes painful feelings really well, right? When you experience anger and sadness, you say, yeah, you're probably suffering. But when you're so excited or you're so happy, like your mom calls you up and says, hey, I'm going to come visit you this Friday. I heard you got a new apartment, a new flat. I'm going to come see you. And you get so excited because mom's coming. You probably wouldn't say you were suffering in that situation. Or say that person you don't know comes and sits really close to you on the bus and your body's touching their body. You probably wouldn't say you were suffering in that situation. So the word suffering explains about 1/3 of what the Buddha is describing here, which is the painful feelings, which means you're missing 2/3 or 66%. You're not understanding the full spectrum of emotions and feelings that the unenlightened mind experiences. So if you're missing 66% of a teacher's teachings, how would you ever be able to get to the ultimate goal? So I don't use the word suffering because it doesn't explain the full spectrum of what the Buddha is actually explaining here. He's explaining the mind being discontent. If you've ever been so excited or so happy that you fell down and you tripped and fell, or you like dropped something that you had and it broke, this is where you can see your mind is shaken up. Your mind's discontent, or it's experiencing discontentedness. This is what the Buddha is explaining to you. So that's why I don't use the word suffering here. So if you use the word discontent, discontented, or discontentedness, it'll bring your mind to the full understanding of what the Buddha is describing as part of this universal truth. Then there's the universal truth of non-self. This is actually a solution to one of the problems that the Buddha discovered in the mind. Those 10 fetters that I was mentioning, the first fetter is something called personal existence view. This is the solution to that. It's called the universal truth of non-self. What personal existence view is, this pollution or this fetter, this defilement of the mind, is where the mind is holding on and it's clinging to the body, and it's clinging to the mind, and it's thinking that this is who you are. The mind will cling to the self-image and or the self-identity, thinking that this is who you are. And as long as you're clinging to the self-image or the self-identity, when you hear agreeable things and you have agreeable contact, you'll get so happy and excited. But when you have disagreeable contact, you'll get frustrated or agitated or annoyed. I'll give you some examples. Say you're at a social event and you spill pizza sauce all over your shirt. You might feel embarrassed because of personal existence view. The mind is clinging to this body, thinking that this is who you are, and now the mind wants to be perceived by others in a certain way. The mind is wanting others to perceive this body and this being in a certain way, and when you spill spaghetti sauce all over your clothes, you're not being perceived the way you want to be perceived. So now you might feel embarrassed because of that, right? Or say you get a wrinkle or a mole or a pimple or maybe a gray hair, or maybe you start losing your hair. You might be shaken up by this, or if you get a little bit of fat here or there, right? You look in the mirror, you see a pimple or a mole, you might be all shaken up about this because the mind is clinging to this body, thinking that this is who you are. If you've ever sat in the mirror, like I did when I was like growing up in school with the mousse and the gel, running it through my hair, trying to get every little hair in exactly the right spot, and you couldn't go outside until you had every little hair in the right spot. Sometimes I missed the school bus. I was doing this so much, right? I'd be standing there in the mirror for 15, 20 minutes trying to get every little hair in exactly the right spot, right? This is the mind clinging to the body, thinking that this is who you are, and you're wanting to be perceived by others in a certain way. Right? Now, if somebody says something to you like, wow, you're so handsome, you're so beautiful, that shirt really brings out the color of your eyes. Whoa, wow, they're talking about me. You'd be like so excited, so happy. But because of impermanence, it's only a matter of time before someone says something degrading and disparaging about this body. And now when somebody says something degrading and disparaging, your mind is going to experience painful feelings. And you can't control what other people say and what other people do. So as long as your mind has personal existence view where you're clinging to this body, thinking that this is who you are, you're going to get shaken up by this. Then there's something called the self-identity. The mind is clinging to a certain identity, like I am Mexican, or I am American, or I am Indian, right? Or I am Argentinian, or any of this I am Chinese, right? I am Japanese, I am Brazilian. It can be your culture, your ethnicity, your sexual orientation, your nationality, maybe your job or occupation. You can be clinging to a certain identity in your mind, and as long as you cling to this and you're experiencing agreeable contact, you'll get pleasant feelings. But when you have disagreeable contact, you have painful feelings. So if somebody says, all Mexicans are friendly and loving and kind, or all Americans are friendly and loving and kind, or all Chinese people are friendly, loving and kind. Oh, well, I am Chinese, or I am American. They're talking about me, so your mind might get so happy and so excited. But now it's only a matter of time before you're at a restaurant or something like this, and 2 tables over, somebody's saying something negative or degrading or disparaging about the country where you come from. And if you identify with I am this, now they're talking about me, and now you're going to get angry. You're going to get frustrated. This is the mind holding on to an identity. Or say you've been in a relationship with a boyfriend or a girlfriend. And when you guys were together, you identified with, I am a boyfriend. I am a girlfriend. When you guys separated, you might have really struggled during that period of time because your mind identified with I am a boyfriend or I am a girlfriend. And now when you were single, the mind didn't identify that way. It was really uncomfortable. And you might have felt like you wanted to hurry up and get right back into another relationship again. This is because the mind was uncomfortable with that role of I am single. The mind identified with I am a boyfriend, I'm a girlfriend, or I'm a husband, I'm a wife, right? And the mind thought the way to solve this is to get right back into another relationship so you can reassume that identity of I am a boyfriend, I'm a girlfriend. And the mind thinks that that's the way to solve the problem, but that doesn't actually solve the problem. Or say you've ever had a job or occupation, maybe like I am a police officer, or I am a lawyer, or I am a taxi driver, or I am a food server. Any of this I am around your job or occupation, as long as you're doing that job, you'll feel great. You'll feel wonderful. But then when you're not having that job anymore, say you get laid off, or the company goes out of business, or maybe you get injured and you can't do that job anymore. Well, if I think that I am a police officer, and for 10 or 15 years, my mind is identifying that way, when I get injured and I can't do that job anymore, and now I am an electrician, the mind doesn't identify with I am an electrician. So now the mind is thinking I am a police officer, and now it really struggles not performing that role anymore because the mind's clinging to this identity of I am a police officer. Sometimes people come here to Thailand and they might be in search of themselves. Some people come here, they'll say, I don't even know who I am anymore. I need to go find myself. I need to go find my true self, right? They go on this journey to try to find themselves. Somebody's not going to find their self here in Thailand. Yourself doesn't exist here in Thailand. In fact, what the Buddha is explaining to you with the universal truth of non-self is that there is no self. Someone might come here to Thailand and they might get a new job, they get new friends, new hobbies, new activities, but none of that stuff is you. If you cling to any of these things, thinking that this is who you are, now when you experience change, when you experience impermanence, you'll struggle, you'll feel difficult. You'll feel like, I don't even know who I am anymore because everything's changed on you. So the mind is going to be constantly clinging and trying to hold on and grasp to this body or to the mind, to the self-image or the self-identity. And it's going to cling to these things thinking that this is who you are. There is a body, there is a mind, and it's come together for this existence. And we refer to this as a person or a human being. But none of this is you. None of this that you're looking at is you, or none of this is me, right? So this is a little bit of the universal truth of non-self. The Buddha is saying there is no self, that none of these things actually are you. It doesn't define who you are as a person. This body doesn't define you. This mind doesn't define you. These things are constantly changing. And as long as you cling to it and you want it to be permanent, when things start changing, you'll really struggle. Okay, so this is just a little bit of an introduction to this. Now, what I'm going to share with you is how to independently reflect on this and see that it's true. Sometimes when I explain this intellectually, people don't understand it right away. And if that's where you're at, that's completely fine, because you will revisit this in the future. But I'm introducing it to you here to help you be able to start to understand what personal existence view is, this confusion, this misunderstanding that the mind has. And then the solution to that is the universal truth of non-self, right? But let me help you to be able to see how you can reflect on this and see that there really is no self, that this body is in you and this mind is in you. Here's how you do it. Think about yourself when you were a child, when you were a teenager, early adulthood, and then now. Think about your character and your personality and how you viewed yourself. Has it been exactly the same through all those stages of life, or has it been changing? What would you say? Has it been exactly, it's been changing, right? It hasn't been exactly the same from childhood to teenage years to early adulthood until now. There hasn't been a permanent self. It's been constantly changing. The way that you think about yourself has been constantly changing. But the mind's going to try to cling to this and think that this is you. Here's another way. Say your arm was amputated and you only have one hand and one arm. Are you less of a person? She's saying no. What do you guys say? No, right? You're not. You're less of a person. So this is where the confusion of the mind comes in. This is where that ignorance or that unknowing of true reality, the lack of wisdom. Because intellectually, you know that this body is in you. Right? Because I just asked you the question, if your arm is amputated, are you less of a person? And you said no, right? So that means intellectually you know that this body is in you. But if somebody says something derogatory or degrading about this body, you'll probably get angry. You'll get frustrated. This is the misunderstanding. This is the confusion that the mind has in the unenlightened state, that it firmly believes this body is you or this mind is you. Here's a third way you can verify that there is no self. Point to yourself. Where are you? Can you point? Yeah, that's where some people point. Some people will point here. Yeah, some people will point here, right? So look at what I'm pointing to. If I point here and I say, I am here, do you see what I'm pointing at? What am I pointing at? I'm pointing to a shirt. That's what I'm literally pointing to. I'm pointing to a shirt. Okay, so if I took off my shirt and I held it up and I pointed to it, is that who I am? Is that who you are? That shirt you're wearing, is that you? What would you say? You say no? No, that shirt's not you, right? Okay, so let's throw away the shirt. Now I might ask you, where are you? Someone might point again. What did I point to? Skin. There's skin there. So if I peeled off the skin and I held it up, is that me? Is that who I am? The skin? Is that who you are? That skin that you've got, is that you? You say no. What do the rest of you guys say? No, that's not you either, right? Okay, so let's throw away the skin. Where are you? And so on my point. You've got ribs, you've got muscle tissue, you've got organs, you've got fluid. None of those bits and pieces and parts are you, right? But the mind in the unenlightened state, with its lack of wisdom of the universal truth of non-self, it'll think that this body is you. It'll cling to this and it'll hold on to this and it'll think this is you. So when somebody says something agreeable about this body, you'll get happy or excited perhaps. And then if you hear something degrading or negative, you'll get angry, you'll get frustrated. And this is coming from personal existence view. This is a pollution. This is a fetter. This is a defilement of the mind. And what the Buddha is teaching you with the universal truth of non-self is that this doesn't exist, that there is a body here, there is a mind here, but you need to eliminate the clinging to it and holding on to it and thinking that this is who you are. And there's certain in-depth learning that you need to do beyond what I'm explaining to you now. And there's certain techniques that you need to be able to implement in order to train your mind that this body is in you and that this mind is in you. So this is just a little bit of an introduction to this. So I'm going to pause here and see what questions you guys have before we move into the Four Noble Truths. Is there anything you guys would like to ask about the three universal truths before we move on? Looks like you have a question. Yeah.
So I'm curious for enlightened beings and their relationship to discontentedness. So amongst people who become enlightened, they are still humans who are in relation to their environment. So what do they experience when they're experiencing, say, starvation, or they're dropped into a war zone, or they have a heavy injury, any kind of adverse situation where the biological body is under, like their biological body is being significantly impaired by their environment?
Sure. So the first thing I'll say is that an enlightened being isn't going to experience being dropped into a war zone, because they're just not going to make that choice to go do that. They're also not going to experience starvation, but let's use some of the other examples that you said, and I'll add some more as well. Like, let's just say an enlightened being is walking through a dark hallway and they stump their toe, right? Because what you're talking about is physical pain, essentially. How does an enlightened being experience physical pain, right? So if an enlightened being experiences physical pain, they will experience the physical part of that, but they won't experience the mental anguish. There's actually two parts that when you're experiencing pain of the physical body, you're experiencing physical pain and you're experiencing mental anguish in the unenlightened state. It's kind of like getting hit by two darts, that if you stumped your toe, you get hit with the physical pain. That's the first dart. But then because the mind is untrained, the mind is going to crave in the unenlightened state permanent comfort of the body. And when the mind's not getting what it wants, which you're going to see here with the Four Noble Truths, it's going to become agitated or frustrated or annoyed. And now you're going to experience mental anguish. And now that mental anguish is going to heighten the physical pain. So this is like getting hit with a second dart. You get the physical dart and you get the mental anguish dart. But an enlightened being doesn't experience the two darts. They experience the first one, the physical pain, but it's very muted. It's very minimal compared to what you experience in the unenlightened state, because you don't experience the mental anguish. You need the physical pain as an enlightened being, because if you were standing, say, too close to a fire and you felt the heat, you're going to need to know, oh, there's a fire there. Let me move. The physical pain is an indication to the mind, hey, something's wrong. You need to make some decisions here to change this. But an enlightened being isn't going to experience the mental anguish. So if they stump their toe, it's like, oh, wow, that really hurts. They already know this is impermanent. This physical pain is impermanent. But in the unenlightened state, which you're going to see here in a moment, is the mind's going to be craving permanent comfort. So that's why you experience the mental anguish. You can't eliminate physical pain as long as you're alive, but you experience physical pain very differently as an enlightened being. It's just very muted, very minimal compared to what you experience in the unenlightened state. Because in the unenlightened state, you're not only getting the physical pain, you're getting the mental anguish, which actually heightens the physical pain. Mm-hmm. Okay. More? Yep. You have a question?
Thank you, David.
Mm-hmm.
My name is Ashok. I want to ask you some question. Like, if there is a fire, when we touch the fire, we know that like fire is, we have to stay away from the fire. So the physical pain help us to stay away from the fire, right? At the same time, mentally we do something, like we do something and it's a wrong thing, then it affects mentally. So it's also like gives you lesson that you should away from this, mental distance. You have to make some distance with this mentally. Mm-hmm. So not physically, mentally. So if you don't take a lesson, then we will do it repetitively, right?
Yes, that's because the lack of wisdom. By the time you get to enlightenment, your mind's fully awake to the wisdom of the natural laws. So certain things that you experience now, like when you get sad or angry or frustrated or some of these other discontent feelings, this is an indication to you that there's a problem in the mind. But by the time you get to enlightenment, you're not experiencing those, but you have the wisdom to know what is wise and unwise in the world. You don't need the painful feelings to alert you that something's wrong about what's going on in the world. You can get to the point where you have full wisdom to know what's wise and unwise and how to handle certain things in your life. Let me go some more here and you guys will understand some more, okay? Let me keep going. So these are the three universal truths, okay? This is the universal truth of impermanence, discontentedness, and non-self. These are building blocks to help you understand the Four Noble Truths. There's one more building block that you guys need to know in order to understand the Four Noble Truths, and that's the understanding of what craving, desire, attachment is. Wants, expectation, longing, yearning. What this is the mind pulling towards the objects of its affection. The mind thinks that the next new shiny object waiting around the corner is going to provide some lasting satisfaction. So the mind chases it and chases it and chases it. This is the example I gave you, whereas if you're in the mall and you see that new pair of shoes, or maybe you see a new computer, a new phone, or something like this, and you're like, oh, I just got to have that. Oh, I want that so badly. Do you guys know what I'm talking about? You experience this? Where the mind's pulling towards something. It's like an unquenchable thirst. The mind just thinks if I can get that thing, everything's going to be perfect in my life. Do you guys know what I'm talking about? Because this is so crucial for you. All of you guys have experienced this. Okay? This is called a craving, desire, attachment, a longing, a yearning. Okay? So now with what I've taught you so far, you can understand the Four Noble Truths, and you can have this breakthrough to understanding what's causing your discontent feelings. So the first Noble Truth is explaining the problem. The second Noble Truth is explaining the cause of that problem. The third Noble Truth is explaining the elimination of it. And the fourth Noble Truth is explaining the complete elimination of it. So the problem that the Buddha is explaining in the first Noble Truth is that all unenlightened beings will experience discontentedness. This is the conditional feelings, the pleasant feelings, the painful feelings, and neither painful nor pleasant. The mind's going up and down and up and down. It's basing its inner feelings on some condition, that if it's sunny outside, you'll be happy. If it's raining outside, you'll be sad. If your bank account balance is here, you'll be happy. But if it goes here, you'll be sad or frustrated. If your mom and dad do this, you'll be happy. If they do this, you'll be sad or frustrated. Right? This is the problem in the unenlightened mind, that it's experiencing discontentedness. It's going up and down and up and down. The cause of that problem in the second Noble Truth, that discontentedness is caused by our own cravings, desires, attachments, because the mind wants everything to be permanent when everything in the world around you is impermanent. So I'm going to say that a few times, and I'm going to give you some examples. The discontentedness, those pleasant feelings, painful feelings, and neither painful nor pleasant, it's caused by craving, desire, attachment, the longing, the yearning, the chasing after the objects of your affection. Because the mind wants things to be permanent when in reality everything is impermanent. If the mind gets what it wants, it gets happy. But if it doesn't get what it wants, it gets sad or frustrated. Here's some examples. Think back to the time when you got together with your girlfriend or your boyfriend. That person who was showing you attention, showing you affection. Oh, you were so happy. You've got this new person in your life. You guys are having great conversations. You're going out to the movies. You're going out to dinner. They're calling you and checking in on you. They're sending you text messages. Everything couldn't be better at the beginning of the relationship. There's all these pleasant feelings because the mind's getting what it wants. This person is showing you affection, right? You guys didn't want anything from each other. You didn't expect anything from each other. You were just interested to get to know each other. You're going to the movies. You're going to the park. You're having great conversations. You might even be having intimate contact where you're having sex with each other and you're getting all these pleasant feelings. But then somewhere along the line in that relationship, you started getting all these expectations and wanting them to do things a certain way. And they started getting all these expectations and wanting you to do things in a certain way. And then you guys got angry or sad or frustrated and you ended the relationship. And now you might have missed this person. You might have felt lonely. You might have felt bored. You might have been angry. You might have been sad or frustrated. It's not the love that caused that. What was causing that is the mind's craving permanence. The mind's wanting this relationship to be permanent, when in reality, this relationship is impermanent. The mind was holding on. It was craving for this relationship to be permanent. And as long as you were together, you were okay with that. But then when you guys were away, that's where the mind experienced massive discontentedness. Okay, so this is one place that you can see that in your relationship. Grandma or grandpa die. Right? You start grieving, you start being sad or frustrated. The mind is craving permanence. As long as grandma and grandpa are alive, you're getting what you want. Your cravings are being fulfilled. But when grandma and grandpa die, you're not getting what you want. So the mind is experiencing sadness or anger or frustration. Or say you've ever been to a wedding, right? And now your brother or your sister, somebody's going off into the world with somebody else. People grieve at weddings. People are sad. People are crying sometimes, right? Because this person is going off into life with somebody else. And the mind is saying, no, I want them to be with me. I thought they were with me permanently. And now when sons and daughters or brothers and sisters are going off into the world, people will grieve and they'll be sad. It's not the love, because if you love this person, it's like, great, they have a new relationship. Wonderful. Go have a great time. Enjoy your life. But no, the mind's holding on. It wants this person to be permanent. It's the same thing if you ever got dropped off at university, or if you can think all the way back to when you got dropped off at kindergarten or preschool. When kids are getting dropped off for the first time, they cry. They cry. They want to be with mom and dad. They thought mom and dad were permanent. So when they get dropped off at school, they cry and cry and cry, right? Or when you got dropped off at university, maybe your parents cried or maybe you cried, right? Here's another more simple example for you. Say there's a certain car that you really want more than anything in the world, and you save for 5 or 10 years for this brand new car. And now you go to the dealership and you pay in cash and you get this perfect car that you've always wanted. And you drive this car off the parking lot. You're driving down the street. Your friends are seeing you. You're honking the horn. They see how successful you are. You're driving this brand new car. And now you park it at the store and you go inside and you come out and there's a scratch on your car. Oh my goodness, you might be so frustrated, right? It's not the scratch that's causing you to be frustrated. And it's not the person who scratched your car. That's not what's causing you to be frustrated. What's causing you to be frustrated is the mind's having craving for permanence. It's wanting this car to be permanently beautiful, when in reality, it's not possible. This car can't be permanently beautiful. Now, we're not talking about what's wise or unwise, because when we walk through parking lots, we aspire not to scratch anybody's car. We're not interested in scratching people's car. But the universal truth of impermanence tells us that this car is not permanent. The paint's going to fade. It's going to get scratches. The upholstery is going to get ripped or torn. But if your mind is craving permanence and you're wanting this car to be permanently beautiful, when your mind is confronted with the impermanence, Your mind doesn't understand this in the unenlightened state. You don't understand the impermanent nature of the world, and your mind's craving permanence. It's wanting this car to be permanently beautiful. So now the mind gets angry or sad or frustrated or agitated or annoyed when it sees this scratch. What's causing the mind to be annoyed or frustrated is that the mind is craving permanence. It's wanting things to be a certain way. And if the mind gets what it wants, it gets happy. But if it doesn't get what it wants, it gets these painful feelings like anger, sadness, and others. And because you live in an impermanent world, you can't always get things your way. And even if you could, if you base your inner feelings on this particular thing, that thing is impermanent. As soon as it changes, your feelings are going to change. You're not going to be happy anymore. This is why you couldn't get to permanent happiness yet, because your mind is basing its inner feelings on something. That if it's sunny outside, you'll be happy. And if you crave the sun, when it's sunny, you'll get so happy and so excited. But then when it's raining, you'll be sad or frustrated. Or if you get so happy when your bank account balance is here, when it goes down here, you'll be sad and frustrated because your mind is craving permanence. Okay? So this is a little bit of the learning of the second noble truth. But remember, you're not believing me. You're not interested in believing what I'm sharing with you. You need to independently verify what I'm sharing with you is true. So what you do is you take a certain situation where you've recently been angry or sad or frustrated or some other discontent feeling. Look at that same situation. It might have been this morning. It might have been yesterday. It might have been last week. At that time, you might have been looking for someone to blame for the feelings that you were having. But now with these fresh eyes, look at this situation. What was it that your mind wanted? That if you would have got what you wanted, you would have been happy. But because you didn't get what you wanted, your mind got angry or sad or frustrated. Can you see it? Because what I'm explaining to you is your mind is causing your own discontent feelings, right? Your mind is causing this itself. If you can't see it, let me know. I will help you to see it. Because I've had students tell me, they said, hold on a second, David. I went to work the other day and my house looked a certain way and it was beautiful. Everything was in the perfect spot. And when I went to work, I came home and my wife had her craft project all over the house. The house was a wreck. When I walked in, I got frustrated. How did my mind cause my frustration? She's the one who had the craft project all over the house. Didn't she cause me to be frustrated? Nope, sure didn't. What caused your mind to be frustrated is that your mind was craving for the house to look a certain way. You had a want, you had an expectation, there was a longing or yearning in the mind. You were craving permanence. When you went to work, the house looked a certain way, and you were expecting for it to look that way when you came home. But all that's happened is impermanence. Your wife has her craft project over the house. The house can't permanently look that way. And when you came home and you saw that impermanence, you got frustrated because you were expecting and longing, yearning for the house to look a certain way. So you can take an example from your life and you should be able to see this yourself. And if you can't see it, let me know because I'm here to help you to be able to see it. Do you guys see how your mind is causing these feelings? You guys aren't giving me any feedback. Yes? No? Sure. Yeah. Get a mic. Ask a question. Yeah.
I'm not sure if I can formulate this the way it's in my mind, but I feel like impermanence also, when this is going to sound harsh, but feels like a good excuse. So if you, for example, if you are in a relationship and you're having struggles and the other person says, okay, let's talk about it. You can say, no, this is just how life is. It's impermanent. So our relationship comes and ends, like it's a way out or something. Do you know what I mean? And the same with the house, like your partner you have expectations. So I understand you create your own feelings, your own misery or your own whatever you feel in that moment. At the same time, as a living together, you have responsibilities towards each other. I think that's my interpretation. That's why it's hard to explain. So maybe you shouldn't have the expectation that it's going to look nice, but the other person can also say, it's impermanent, so I made it trash, or I did this because that's just life. Then like, where is the? I don't know what I'm trying to say, but that's just what I was thinking.
So the first part is that you're not using impermanence as an excuse, but what you're doing is you're understanding true reality, that it's not possible for this house to look permanently beautiful. I'll give you another example. I have a 12-year-old son. If I expect his grades to be a certain thing, when they're not that, I'd be angry. I'd be frustrated because I have an expectation that his grades should be a certain level, right? As long as you have a want or expectation, you can't get that met permanently. It's just not possible. So as long as you have wants and expectation and longing and yearning, the world is impermanent. So you're not going to be able to ever to get those wants permanently. It's just not possible. So it's not that you're using impermanence as an excuse. It's that you're seeing true reality. The true nature of the world is that it's not possible for your mind to get what it wants permanently. So in the example of the wife having the house look a certain way when the person came home, well, it's going to look a different way each time this person comes home. You can't have the house permanently looking one particular way. And if you tried, you would drive yourself mad. And because it's just not possible. So if you get rid of your cravings, your desires, your longing, your yearning, wanting things to be a certain way, then you will be able to get to the peace and the joy.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's becoming more clear, but I think the main thing then for me is, when do you just accept, okay, it's impermanence, life is ever changing, and when do you like, for example, you're looking for a new job, and you get rejected 5 times. How not to give up? Because you can think, okay, it's impermanent, so I'm not going to keep trying. This is just the outcome. Do you understand what I mean? I find it really hard to explain my thought.
I'm not teaching you that you should stop trying to get a job.
No.
What I'm teaching you is to not form your inner feelings based on whether you get the job or not. So each time you apply for a job, if you get denied each time, each of those 5 times, you're going to beat yourself up and you're going to feel miserable. And it's going to be hard to apply for the 6th time. But if you can understand what I'm teaching you, and ultimately you need to train your mind to be able to understand this and be able to then train your mind to be able to do it and practice it, is that you'll need to be able to see how forming your inner feelings on whether you get something or not is just going to lead you down a constant path of discontentedness, because you can't permanently get what you want. It's just not possible. So as long as the mind continues to have craving, desire, attachment, if you get what you want, you get happy. And if you don't get what you want, you're going to get angry or sad or frustrated. So you need to be able to see the mind chasing after things and longing, yearning, and forming these expectations, and the longing, the yearning, the craving, the desiring, the wanting. That's what's causing the mind to be discontent. And as long as your mind's doing that, you'll continue to experience discontentedness. And that's where the mind will push people away, thinking that it's other people that are causing you to be angry, right? Or you'll be bitter, harsh, and hostile. Like my son, sometimes he has a F, or he has a D or an E, right? If I get angry and bitter and harsh and I just start yelling and hollering at him, this doesn't solve anything. Right? So instead, we look at his grades, we're like, hey, looks like you got this F in computer science. Do you know what's going on here? And he's like, oh, the teacher put that into the computer system. I haven't turned in the assignment yet. He told me I have 2 more weeks to do it, but he just put it into the computer system. And as soon as I turn in my assignment, the grade's going to be updated and I'll get a better grade. Oh, okay. Well, is there anything you need from me in order to help you with that? Nope, I got it, Dad. I'll take care of it. Perfect. Right? And that's exactly what happened. He turned in his assignment. His grade went from an F to a B+. And then the teacher updated the computer system, right? Whereas if you go in being bitter and harsh and hostile, or if I put my expectations on my son, this doesn't solve anything. So when you see that you're causing your own feelings, now you can eliminate your craving, your desires, your attachments, and you can navigate the world more peacefully. So I can explain this to you intellectually, but then to be able to do it is a whole nother thing. To be able to eliminate these. That's the next part, the third noble truth. So what I'm explaining to you now is the problem and the cause. The cause of these discontent feelings is within your own mind. What the unenlightened mind is going to think is that it's something external, that it's somebody else or it's some situation. Do you have a question? No? Okay. So let me keep going, and then you guys can ask some more questions if you like. You have a question? Yeah. Go ahead.
I see that the way that the second and third truth here are framed is centered around that aspect of craving, desire, attachment, like the kind of pull. And I don't see represented the inverse of that, like the aversion, the pushing away, the anger. So just wanted to hear your perspective on that.
Yeah. So it's because of the craving that the mind has the aversion, right? That the mind wants things to be a certain way. So say the mind is craving to be permanently happy, and the mind wants happiness all the time. And now when it has this anger, because of its lack of wisdom, it's falsely attributing the painful feelings to this person, to this friend. This friend said something, you disagree with it, now you get angry, you think the problem is the friend, and because of its craving, it thinks that the way to solve this is, I don't want to hear these things. I don't want to hear this from somebody. So the mind's craving permanence. It wants to permanently hear agreeable things. And when it hears this disagreeable thing, it thinks the way to solve this is to push this person away. And then I won't ever hear this again, and now I can get to my happiness. But the mind doesn't understand. It's only a matter of time before you have another friend or another person in your life that says something you disagree with. That disagreement is just impermanence. That's all it is. But the mind might crave permanence. It's craving to hear things that are agreeable all the time. So the mind in the unenlightened state, it's going to do three things when it has the lack of wisdom. It's going to, when it experiences this anger, it's going to try to push away what it perceives to be the problem. It's going to be bitter, harsh, and hostile to that person or in that situation, or it's going to put its expectations on people and try to control people, because the mind thinks if I can just get my cravings fulfilled, everything will be perfect. But this doesn't solve the actual problem, because the problem is the discontentedness, and the cause of it is the craving. So pushing people away, being bitter, harsh, and hostile, or putting your expectations on somebody doesn't actually solve it. What solves it is the third noble truth. The third noble truth is explaining to you that eliminating discontentedness is possible by eliminating craving, desire, attachment. If you eliminate your cravings, where you're wanting things to be a certain way permanently, then you can actually eliminate your discontentedness, right? So think back to that same situation that you were with the boyfriend or girlfriend, and when you guys were together, you were so happy. But then when you separated, you were angry and frustrated and agitated. And you were angry and frustrated and agitated for a while until your mind let go. When your mind let go, you eliminated your craving. You eliminated your attachment to that person. Your mind got to peace. Your mind got to joy. You were like, you know what? If he wants to be with someone else, so be it. If she wants to be somewhere else, so be it. Right? And the mind let go, and you gained your peace, right? So that's what the third noble truth is explaining to you, is that the way to get to your peace and your joy is to not crave this permanence, not to have this longing, yearning. And the way that you do that is through the fourth noble truth. The fourth noble truth is explaining the complete perfect plan, that this is the eightfold path that is going to teach you how to eliminate your cravings, desires, attachments. That's what's going to help you to train your mind and transform your mind. So the aversion that I'm talking about and these other things that you just asked about, that's kind of helping you to fully understand this. The Buddha is not explaining it here in the Four Noble Truths, but this is what you can understand when you understand the totality of his teachings. And you can see it in your own life, because what I'm explaining to you, you've experienced, right? You've had situations where you pushed people away, or you pushed the situation away. Like say, like you don't like to be around large crowds. You might say, oh, I'm never going to go around large crowds. And the mind thinks that that's going to solve your problem. But that doesn't solve your problem, because you're walking down the street, you're walking through New York City, and you turn the corner, and the next thing you know, you're in a big crowd. And now you're uncomfortable in that situation because your craving is still in your mind. You haven't solved the problem by pushing the person away or pushing the situation away. So you know you've done that before and it didn't work. And you've also been bitter and harsh and hostile, and that didn't work. And then there's been situations where you put expectations on people and try to control people, and that didn't work either, because there's 8 billion people in the world. You can't control 8 billion people to do things your way. Right? So if you went around the world trying to teach other people to do things your way, you're not going to ever be able to get to peace, because you can't train 8 billion people to do things your way. So what the Buddha is teaching you is you only need to train one person. Do you know who you need to train? You got it. You need to train your own mind. If you can train your own mind with the guidance of the teachings of the Buddha, you can get to peace, you can get to joy. But as long as you want things to be a certain way, you can only be happy when you get it that way. And then when things aren't that way, you can't be happy. Right? You guys understanding? If you're not, let me know. Okay? So what right view is having the right view that it's your own craving, desire, attachment that's causing this. It's your own mind that's causing this. What wrong view would be is to blame other people. That would be wrong view if you are blaming other people. And as long as you blame other people, you're never going to get to peace and you get to joy, because you're looking in the wrong place. But if you can embrace what I'm sharing with you and independently verify it, and you can see it's your own mind that's causing these feelings, now you just need to apply the tools and the techniques to be able to solve the cravings, desires, attachments, and you can actually get to peace and you can get to joy. We call it liberation, where you liberate the mind. The mind becomes free of these strong feelings. But as long as you have wrong view, where you blame other people for what you're experiencing, you'll never get to peace. You'll never get to joy, because you'll keep trying to change other people instead of changing your own mind. You need to be able to change your own mind. So there's all these other steps on the Eightfold Path that you need to learn, but they're all based on right view. Because if you didn't understand that it was your own mind that's causing the difficulties and causing the problems, why would you ever meditate? Why would you ever train your mind to come talk to your teacher and get help? It's everybody else that's causing you to be angry. So it's everybody else that should be here. You're perfect, right? That's what the unenlightened mind thinks sometimes, is like, you're perfect. Everyone else is the problem. But what the Buddha is teaching you is, no, the problem is actually inside your own mind. And this is why you can heal from what hurt you, so that you never need to hurt again. But what hurt you is within your own mind. Okay, so that's what the Buddha is bringing your attention to. So any questions?
I guess around, what really struck me was when you talk about the right view, but before you talk about like also, I guess somebody else was asking something around like being in difficult life situations, and I just thought about like war, flood, domestic abuse, and how it can be understood that if we think the problem is how our mind perceives things, we might be kind of blaming ourselves, but it can kind of lead to be accepting that the situation, which is not actually okay. So I was wondering whether the right view, like what kind of made me to make sense, and I don't know if I'm understanding it correctly, that right view is viewed together with right action, that we can still accept that our mind is creating the suffering, and at the same time it doesn't mean that the situation is okay, that it doesn't mean that being, I don't know, in domestic abuse situation is okay, it doesn't say that behavior is okay, but we do have a choice to do the right action. And I guess that's what I'm thinking about, like
Exactly.
the connection between these parts, this being part of the puzzle, and unless it's viewed with other pieces of the puzzles, it could be misunderstood as I'm blamed to my form suffering, although the situation might be globally someone is being abusive and they are doing wrong action.
Yeah.
So I'm not to blame for that I'm in this painful situation. However, my own suffering is inside. So there's about right view, and I need to take right action at the same time. Is that right? What I'm
Right.
trying
The way
to
you're
understand?
thinking is exactly the way you would need to think. And this is what will help you too, what we were talking about, is it's important to think to understand that what the Buddha is teaching you is not who's to blame or who's at fault. He's just helping you see true reality, that it's your own mind that's causing these feelings. Because as long as you go around the world thinking it's other people that are causing these feelings, you'll never actually be able to solve them. But in a situation where someone's in domestic violence situation or domestic abuse, they have a choice to make. It's not like, oh, well, everything's impermanent. I can't be with a person who treats me nice. Oh, well, it's not that. It's what's wise here. Oh, I'm in an unfortunate situation. There's someone who's hitting me and abusing me. I need to get out of here, right? But when you have craving and clinging, you'll hold on to that relationship. You won't let go. And this is where people stay stuck in this continuous relationship where they're getting abused over and over and over again. So an enlightened being wouldn't be in a relationship where there's domestic abuse. You just wouldn't be in that kind of relationship. By the time you get to enlightenment, all your relationships are at ease. Everything's completely peaceful and joyful. But on your way to enlightenment, there's certain decisions that we've made in the past that you need to clean up. You need to clean up these decisions, and getting the wisdom of the path to enlightenment is what's going to help you to be able to do that. So the way you're thinking about it is accurate. It's not the outside world, it's your own mind. And the more you come to terms with that and you realize that your mind is causing these feelings, then you can actually eliminate them. Mm-hmm. You have another question?
I do. It's kind of complicated and messy. So a lot of this framing is a very individualistic one of like thinking around the self as like this distinct thing and how the self perceives in response to what's happening in the world around them. Mm. But if we take the perspective that the self is inseparable from the world, and that if that is the case, and the self witnesses a lot of suffering that is happening around in the world, suffering that is imposed on the natural environment, humanity's ways of designing technology, and how this is resulting in like biodiversity loss, different types of harms that are inflicted on one another that's mediated through technology. I get that the self's like a discontentedness that's in response to that is from a certain kind of craving for, say, a more just world, or some kind of craving for more wisdom and more care that is put into the decisions that other humans are making, and by not, say, pursuing in harms that are resulting elsewhere. So I don't know exactly what the like how to frame this as a question, but yeah, just in terms of the pain and the complexity of what's happening around in the world and what actually warrants, say, right effort and response to all that complexity. Yeah, maybe just what your reaction to that is.
I don't hear a question yet. I'm sorry, but I can't respond to it because I don't hear a question. Is there something that you would like to ask in there? Maybe you need to think about it. We'll go to someone else.
I think I kind of have similar struggle in my way of thinking, because I've always worked for NGOs, and I had a discussion with someone who read a lot about Buddhism, and he told me, you shouldn't do this kind of work. You should just focus on yourself, on how you behave, on how you are, which I agree with. Of course, you should focus on this. At the same time, yeah, maybe it's a craving, but the world, the way it is right now, there's a lot of war, there's a lot of injustice, there's a lot of animal suffering, and I feel like I want to contribute to making this better, but then I'm focusing on the actions of other people, on what they should or shouldn't do. So how does this responsibility, I also find it hard to make it a question, but maybe how does this, is this a responsibility that we should act on this? Because there are a lot of Buddhist centers that actually help, that try to have peace talks, peace negotiations. They're present there for help people that are poor, that are suffering. So how does this fit into the idea that you should focus on yourself and not so much on what other people are doing?
Okay. So first off, the person who told you that you should or shouldn't be doing any particular type of work and that they said they were practicing Buddhism, this isn't from the Buddha, right? Like, you choose whatever is best for you. Like, I would never tell you what job you should or shouldn't have. Whatever choice you make, it's your choice. So just because that person that you associated with being Buddhist said this thing to you, but let me just finish. Even though this person you were associating with Buddhism said this thing to you, you shouldn't think that that's what Buddhism is teaching. Okay, so that's the first thing. The next thing is that yes, there's lots of complications in the world. There's lots of issues. Like right now, there's war in a lot of different places, right? And what the Buddha is teaching you to do is not to go out into the world and change other people, because you can't change other people. That's not how you're going to get to peacefulness. This is what most people are taught in the world, is to go out into the world and change other people. But you're not going to get to peace and joy by that. You can't change other people. You can't even change your own mind sometimes. You can't even change the way that you think. The way that you get to peacefulness is you train your own mind. That's not to say that you don't contribute to the world and that you don't help other people that are in need of help, because surely you can do that. But like, for example, like a war breaking out, you didn't start the war, so therefore you can't stop the war. It's not possible for you to stop it. But what the Buddha is teaching you to do, and he's just getting started here with the Four Noble Truths, is he's explaining for you not to crave and long and yearn for the world to be a certain way. If you long and yearn and crave for the world to be peaceful, when the world isn't peaceful, you'll be angry, you'll be sad, you'll be frustrated, you'll be agitated. But he's also not teaching you to be all the way on this other side where your mind's indifferent and you could care less about the world. This is what the unenlightened mind typically sees. You're able to usually see craving, desiring, attaching, longing, yearning, wanting the world to be a certain way, or the mind can see the other side where the mind's indifferent. You could care less about how things happen in the world. The Buddha is teaching the middle way. The middle way is that you can train your mind to not long and yearn for the world to be a certain way, so that when there's peace and nobody's fighting and having wars, you can be peaceful and joyful. But also when there's a war going on, that you don't base your feelings on the war. Like right now, I know there's a war in the world. I'm not upset. I'm not frustrated. I'm not agitated. I'm not annoyed. Doesn't mean I don't care. Doesn't mean I don't love somebody. Right? It just means that I'm not forming my feelings based on the war, right? It's kind of like if your friend was down in the quicksand, would you jump down into the quicksand and try to help them get out? Or would you stand on stable ground and reach out your hand and say, grab my hand, look me in the eyes, grab my hand, you're going to need to kick, and I'm going to pull. I'm going to pull and you're going to kick. Right? So you're going to stay on stable ground. So what the Buddha is teaching you to do is teaching you to train your own mind not to crave for the world to be a certain way, because all these changes in the world, as soon as everything changes, you're not going to be able to maintain your peace and joy. If you want the world to be a certain way, you can only be happy when it's that way. And I will share with you that the world is never going to be the way that you want it to be in your mind. It's never going to happen, because there's 8 billion people in the world, and you can't train 8 billion people to do things your way. What the Buddha is teaching you is how the world is. He's explaining to you that there's constant change, and people in the world are going to do things differently. But if in your mind you can only be happy when people do things your way, then you might feel like your job is to go out into the world and teach other people to do things your way. This is a common thing that people think. But what the Buddha is teaching you to be able to do is let go and realize that everybody's going to do things in different ways, and it's each individual person's responsibility to train their own mind. You need to take the responsibility for your mind, just like everybody else takes the responsibility for their mind. And when you train your mind, then you can get to peace and joy. But as long as you keep wanting the world to be a certain way, when it's not that way, you'll be frustrated and agitated.
Can I respond to it?
Sure.
Yeah, thank you.
But remember, ask questions.
Yeah.
Right? Because you guys aren't here to convince me of anything.
No. I'm asking questions.
What you're here to do is ask questions to understand how to get to enlightenment. So not a response, but questions.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Because you said you think you can't change other people, right?
I'm sorry?
You said you can't change.
You
what
can't change other people.
Yeah.
Each individual person has to choose to change for themselves.
Yeah, but you can. I feel like you can. Okay, so I worked in animal welfare, and there's a lot of bad things happening in my country. Cannot speak for other countries. And my belief is that you can change other people by talking with them and showing them things, just like you are changing the way I think in this conversation in this morning today. So yeah, people have to change. Eventually, they have to change their way of thinking themselves. But you can plant a seed, right? So doesn't that mean you can take the responsibility to like talk to other people about what you think is right, or does it mean you should just stay away from?
I'm not teaching you to stay away from anybody. What you're sharing is you believe you can change other people. And what I'm teaching you is to get away from beliefs, is to be able to see the truth. I'm not changing you. I'm not changing any of you guys here. I have no interest in changing you. I'm not here to convince you of anything here. I'm not here to try to force or control you to do anything. I'm sharing with you the path to enlightenment. I'm sharing with you the teachings of the Buddha. If you choose to change your thinking, you're choosing to do that. I'm just sharing information with you. And you guys have chosen to come here and learn, right? So it's your choices that are leading you to an improved understanding of the world and improved wisdom. It's not me that's changing you. It's me just offering teachings. And then you get to choose whether or not you're going to learn that or not. So if I had the craving to go out into the world and change the world, I'd never be happy. I'd never be content, because I can't change 8 billion people. It's just not possible. But what I can do is I can teach here, I can teach online, I can go around the world and teach in different places in the world. And whoever chooses to come and learn, they can come and learn, and then they can understand. But it's each individual's choice to learn and change and improve their mind. It's not up to me to do that. I'm not the one responsible for that. So that's what I'm helping you to be able to see, because if you take on this burden of going out into the world and trying to change other people, you're going to be constantly trying to change other people to do things your way and to have your same level of thinking. But your thinking right now is leading to anger and sadness and frustration. You don't know everything that you need to know in the world. And as long as you go out into the world and try to convince people to do things your way, you'll never get to peace and joy. And that doesn't mean you don't share with people. Because when I was on the airplane traveling to Mexico, people were like, hey, you're wearing all white. Your hair is shaved. What do you do? Where are you going? I was like, oh, I'm going to Mexico. They're like, oh, what are you going to do in Mexico? Oh, I'm going to be teaching the teachings of the Buddha. Oh, really? Is that what you do? You teach the teachings of the Buddha? Yep, sure do. Right? So we went to whatever level of detail that person was interested in talking about. I didn't whip out the slideshow and start showing them the Four Noble Truths and the Three Universal Truths and all these kinds of things. It was just based on what it is that they were asking me, right? And then I shared information with them because they were interested to know. But I only went to a level of detail that they were interested to know. I didn't take on the burden of, I've got to convince this person by the end of this plane ride that the Buddhist teachings are the best thing ever. And if you learn and practice them, you'll be able to get to enlightenment, because that's a real burden for you to carry around to try to convince other people. And if you're trying to convince other people to do things your way right now hasn't led to peace and hasn't led to joy. So the reason why the Buddha was so effective is because he wasn't trying to convince anybody of anything. He was just helping those who have a sincere interest to learn and practice his teachings. Whoever came in interested to learn, he then shared that with them. Right? So I know in the world, a lot of people are taught to go out into the world and try to convince people to do certain things. You'll never get to peace. You'll never get to joy that way, because you'll never be able to convince enough people, right? Because the mind's always going to crave more. It's just like money. Think about when you first got your first job, you're like, wow, I'm rich. I remember when I got my first job, making however much money per hour I was making, I was like, wow, I'm rich. I remember getting $6 an hour promotion. I was like, wow, I'm rich. I'm making so much money now, right? Well, you learn pretty quickly that's not enough money, right? And then I wanted more, and I wanted more, and I wanted more, and I wanted more. The same thing's going to happen with craving, desire, attachment. If you want to convince 5 people to do a certain thing, well, then once you get to the 5, you're going to want 10. And when you get to 10, you'll get happy, but then that happiness will fade away, and then you're going to want 20. And then you get to 20, you're going to want more and more and more. And you can never be happy, because the mind just keeps having this unquenchable thirst of wanting more and more and more. So the Buddha is teaching you to eliminate your cravings, but then you might make wise decisions to help people, right? Because that's what I'm doing. I'm here to help people, right? But I can only help people who choose to come and get help. But I'm not changing anybody. I'm just here sharing teachings, and then people decide for themselves if they would like to learn and investigate and go deeper and understand more fully. I understand this isn't the way you currently think. I understand that. I know it's different. But this is the way that you get to enlightenment, is you get to enlightenment by not carrying around this burden to change other people.
I think you've answered my question, and if I can kind of play back the answer to make sure my understanding is correct.
Sure.
So similar to how if you're hungry and you feel that the physical signal of hunger in your body, there's a way of relating to that's skillful versus unskillful. And the skillful way would be to nourish yourself. And it likewise, if you are sensing an external pain that's out there, there's a nuance and a way of relating to that where you're finding that middle path of not falling into irresponsibility and neglect, but not trying to overcompensate around responsibility, but finding the right action that is still responding to the external pain in some way that's done in that nourishing way.
I'm not sure that I understand 100% what you're sharing. You're using a few of the words up here that you haven't learned about what's behind this. There's actually words of the Buddha behind each one of these. Just like with right view, there's a bunch of things behind that. But what the Buddha is teaching you to do is to not form your inner feelings on some condition. That if it's sunny outside, you get happy, and if it's raining outside, you're going to get sad and frustrated. So you got to be able to see what's called conditional pleasant feelings as just as much a part of the problem as the painful ones. Because, for example, if I get so happy that I got a brand new job, and this is the perfect job, the best title, the best salary, everything, the coworkers, the mission of the company is so wonderful, and I get so excited about this, well, 3 years later, when the company goes out of business, I'm going to be sad. I'm going to be frustrated. I'm going to be irritated and annoyed. And the mind doesn't see 3 years later that the problem is that you got so excited based on the condition of getting this job. So what you do is you learn how to function in the middle way. That, hey, this is a great job. I'm going to enjoy this job. This is wonderful. I'm going to do a great job. This is going to be so wonderful. But your mind already knows it's impermanent. It's not going to last permanently. It's not possible, right? But as long as the mind's craving for this job to be permanent, when you get it, you're going to get so excited and happy, and now you're holding on to it. And then when it's over, you're going to get sad and frustrated. So the Buddha is teaching you how to work towards things as a goal, as an objective, and as an interest. And when you can gradually do that, and you're not clinging to things, wanting it to be permanent, you can actually be peaceful in all situations. So this trip that I went to in Mexico, we were moving around like crazy. I went to Mexico City. I was there for one night in a hotel. Then we went to Cuernavaca, and we were staying at this lady's parents' house, and there was no air conditioning. The food was completely different. There was all these different changes with the venue and the place I was teaching. We didn't have the supplies that we needed. Then we ended up flying down to another city to teach at the week down there. The week went wonderful, by the way. And then we went down to this other city, and then we were there for 2 days. There was a hurricane coming in the place that we were staying at. It was a house that had solar energy, and the batteries went out after 2 days because there was no sun. So we had to move to this hotel about 5 minutes down the road. We moved to this hotel, and then we stayed at the hotel, and then we ended up moving back to the house where the lady was originally had us at. That there wasn't any hot water. There was all these different changes, right? So if my mind was craving a hot shower when I was taking cold showers, I would have been upset. I would have been angry. Or if I was craving air conditioning and I always wanted to be in the air conditioning, 3 weeks, there was no air conditioning. I didn't know that when I went there. I was just going to help share the teachings, and I know that I didn't have any craving. But when I showed up and there was no air conditioning, I was like, all right, no big deal. I've trained my mind to be able to sleep with no air conditioning before. So the Buddha is teaching you how to not crave any one particular thing, so that when all this change is happening, your mind can be peaceful. All these changes that were happening is completely peaceful. Completely peaceful. So you can't do that as long as your mind has craving for permanence. So it's this eightfold path, and there's 8 individual steps here that you need to learn each individual step to be able to know how to practice and how to train your mind. You can't boil the teachings of the Buddha down to just one phrase or one paragraph or something like that. You need to be able to really deeply go into them and be able to train your mind, and you can get to the point where you're never upset, you're never angry, no matter what's changing in your life. Because back here at this second noble truth, where it says the mind craves permanence, another way to say that is that the mind does not like impermanence. The mind doesn't like change. Think about your life. Whenever that you've experienced change, your mind didn't like it. You move to a new place, you can't sleep for the first couple of days, right? Perhaps, or the first week or two, you don't quite sleep well, right? It's not until you're there for a week or 2 or 3 that you can actually sleep well, right? Or you get a new job and you feel anxiety, even though it's a job that you really wanted. You feel anxiety, you feel stress, right? Because it's a new thing and you're experiencing this change. You go from this job that you were perfectly comfortable in to now this new job that is all new, and your mind's shaken up by this, right? So your mind doesn't like change, is what the Buddha is teaching you. And whenever you experience change in your life, your mind's going to experience discontentedness, because the mind's craving and holding on, wanting this thing to be permanent, but yet you're experiencing all this change. This is what the Buddha is helping you to see. And if you guys can see that, that's what I'm teaching you here so far, is that your mind is craving permanence, wanting things to be a permanent way. And you're not ever going to experience that. Everybody in the world isn't going to function the way you want them to function because of impermanence. It's just not possible. Not everybody's going to agree with you. It's just not possible, right? Because of impermanence. Everyone's going to have different thoughts and different ideas. So if we can only be happy when everyone agrees with us, then there's only one person that you can be happy with, because there's only one person in the world that you're going to agree with 100% of the time. Do you know who that is? I think you know, don't you? Right? Yeah, it's only going to be you. That's it. You're the only person you're going to agree with 100%. And sometimes you might not even agree with yourself, right? You might be not agreeing with yourself. So you need to get to the point where you start seeing impermanence in the world, and your mind doesn't crave for things to be a certain way permanently. Okay, and this is going to be gradual training, gradual practice, and gradual progress that the mind does this. So this is just the wisdom section. And what you can walk away with practicing this in terms of your practice is now and forever. Whenever you get to a situation where your mind's discontent, instead of looking around for somebody to blame for your discontent feelings, look inward. Try to figure out, what do you want? There's something you want. Right? If you show up to the airport and your flight's delayed or it's canceled and you get angry or frustrated, your mind's causing that. Your mind wants every single plane to take off on time. It's just not possible. The universal truth of impermanence tells us that planes are going to be delayed. Planes are going to get canceled. There's going to be a maintenance issue. There's going to be a crew issue. There's going to be a weather issue. But if you're craving to have every single plane take off on time, when you show up and your flight's delayed or canceled, you'll be angry or you'll be frustrated, right? So you can get to peace and joy when you understand this. Because when you show up and your flight's 2 hours delayed, well, of course, because this is impermanence. And now all you need to do is go do something else. Go get some food, go take a nap, go, look at some social media, go play some games online, go do something else. No need to long and yearn and crave to go do this other thing. Just understand you're facing some impermanence. This is the natural world, that things are impermanent. Okay, so that's what the Buddha is teaching you here, is to look inward. Instead of blaming other people, is look inward and figure out, what are you craving? What are you longing? What are you yearning for? And when you need help, you can reach out to me, and I'm here to help you. You can reach out and you say, David, I'm so angry and frustrated, I don't even know why. Can you help me understand? Okay. So we've had a bit of a discussion here, more than normal. That's fine. I'm pleased to answer questions with you, but I feel like we should probably wrap things up and kind of move on with our day. I'll just end by thanking you guys for joining, and at the same time, just reminding you guys of what the teachings of the Buddha are all about, which is right here. The teachings of the Buddha are to heal from what hurt you, so that you never need to hurt again. That's what his teachings are for. But you need to gradually learn them, you need to gradually practice, and you need to gradually progress on the path to enlightenment. And that's where continued training is going to help you. So if you'd like to learn some more, you can see through our group learning program and our other classes, courses, and retreats, we'll be able to help you either here at the temple or you can join online. Tomorrow I have a class at 9 a.m. where I'm going to be teaching the frequently asked questions section of this book, which is Developing a Life Practice, the path that leads to enlightenment. This is the very first foundational book that you can get online by downloading it for free. You can take it and go print it. You can get printed versions here by just reimbursing us for our printing cost, or you can get it on Amazon. This is the first place to start, is this first book. And then a course like that's starting on Monday, where Monday through Friday this week coming up, 9 to 3, this is where we're really going to go into detail and helping you guys to understand it. So there's continued support on the path to enlightenment. If you would like help, there's books, audiobooks, videos, podcasts, quizzes. All this stuff is available for you at no cost. There's in-person and online classes, courses, and retreats. You can access all of this from our website. We have 2 ongoing programs that are both in-person and online at 9 a.m. Or 9 p.m. on Saturday and Sunday. We have the group learning program. And depending on where you are in the world, it might be a little bit different time, but there should be a time zone that is available for you to be able to take a class either Sunday or Wednesday at 9 a.m. or 9 p.m. Thai time. So in North America, it's Saturday night and Sunday morning, right? So it just depends on what time zone you're in. But if you can't make the live class, it's actually recorded, and you can actually watch the recording at your own pace. So the group learning program is where some people choose to start. That's a 7-month program where I gradually walk you through this book chapter by chapter over a 7-month period. Then there's the Pali Canon and English Study Group, which some of you guys participated in this morning. That's a 1.5-year program where we go through volumes 2 through 13. And when I go through that an entire 1.5 years, it takes that amount of time to go through the entire book series. And that's going to help you fill in all the different content from the foundational programs. The Pali Canon English Study Group is going to help you fully understand based in the words of the Buddha. And then you can have personal discussions, either in person or online. You can meet with me when you're in the same city. Just let me know that you'd like to meet and we can spend some time with each other. Or if you'd like to meet online through Zoom, we can schedule an appointment. There's a website. From our website you can schedule, and it'll send me a notification. It'll send you a notification, and then we meet in Zoom, because it's one thing to learn in class, but it's a whole other thing to be able to apply it in your day-to-day situation. So when you're having a certain challenge in your life, you can just meet with me and I will help you to understand how to apply it. I won't tell you what you should or shouldn't be doing, but I'll just teach you the teachings of the Buddha, and then you decide for yourself how you'd like to apply them in any given situation. And then there's a Facebook group where students are asking questions, and then I'm answering them. Other students aren't answering the questions, it's just me. Some people like to go in there and ask questions. Some people like to go in there and read the answers from other people. So if you like Facebook, you can go in there and you can maybe learn some things as well. It's like an online classroom. And all of these things are available at no cost. Okay, so if you guys like to talk some more, because I know you might have some other questions that you might like to talk about, you feel free to come up and we can talk after class, or we can talk another time. But thank you guys for joining. It's been wonderful to spend this afternoon with you, and perhaps we'll see you guys in a future class, okay? Be well and take care. Sawadee ka. Thank you again for watching. Enjoy your meditation. Look forward to seeing you online and answering any questions that you might have. Thank you so much.